the mental transmitter of Marvel. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 201, Strange Battle, Part 2. The Black Queen was only partially immune to energy attacks, but Alex could absorb it and use it for his own benefit. Seeing the fire beast approaching, Alex showed no sign of panic. Instead, he seemed rather smug, diving into it more with a look of relish. Alex devoured a vast amount of fire energy like a voracious whale. The immense energy quickly infused every cell within him, replenishing them with vitality and vitality. Alex's condition steadily improved, and his physical fitness soared. Seeing all the fire beasts she had summoned being snatched away by Alex, the Black Queen's expression darkened. Her expression turned cold and she said in a deep voice, "You like to absorb? Then I'll let you absorb as much as you want." As soon as she finished speaking, two more fire beasts, even larger than the last, appeared out of thin air and swooped down upon Alex, giving him no chance to think or fight back. The fierce flames gradually scorched and yellowed Alex's clothes. Alex no longer bothered to protect them, and simply used energy to conjure a set of clothes and put them on. Alex frantically devoured the flaming beasts summoned by the Black Queen, like a bottomless pit. Within a few moments, most of the two flaming beasts had been absorbed into Alex's body, the remainder filing the flame spirits he controlled. The flame spirits took on humanoid form, roughly the size of a normal human, complete with eyes, ears, nose, mouth, and limbs, like a mythical fire god. Under Alex's deliberate control, the flame spirits stopped growing in size and instead continuously improved in quality. From their initial orange-yellow hue, to golden yellow, and now to milky white, their blazing heat seemed to burn through the very sky. Alex had expected the Black Queen to give up, but he had clearly underestimated her perseverance. With a cold snort, the Black Queen summoned two more flaming beasts and awakened two more buildings, seemingly preparing for a comprehensive attack of both physical and energy. After absorbing the immense amount of energy, Alex felt his best ever, unfazed by the Black Queen's all-out assault. Just as Alex had anticipated, the two fire beasts were absorbed by him once again, while the two buildings that had been awakened were reduced to ash by the fire spirits he controlled. "I still don't believe you can keep absorbing," the Black Queen, seemingly sullen, refused to admit defeat, continuing to summon fire beasts with all her might, refusing to stop until Alex was suffocated. Alex, brimming with confidence, was unfazed by any amount of energy. Even if his body couldn't handle it, there was still another fire spirit. Alex hadn't imagined that the fire spirit he had suddenly created would be so powerful, and he couldn't help but think about preserving it forever. It could serve as a helper, and also as an energy storage unit. After all, the fire spirit itself was an energy body, so there was no need to worry about it exploding from absorbing too much energy. In this comical standoff between the Black Queen summoning fire beasts and Alex absorbing them, over an hour passed unnoticed, and the AIM soldiers on the ground were growing impatient. At this point, the Black Queen finally stopped, panting heavily. She looked across at Alex, her face slightly pale, sweat dripping from her lips. Alex, feeling similarly uncomfortable, her body completely saturated with energy. The sheer volume of energy made her feel like she might float up at any moment, like a fully inflated balloon. Furthermore, the fire spirit had grown considerably larger, now standing almost 2 meters tall, resembling a small giant. Alex desperately wanted to maintain the fire spirit's size, but as the energy continued to flow in, control became increasingly difficult. Forced to do nothing, Alex relaxed his control of her size, absorbing the energy of several more fire beasts. Alex glanced at the speechless Black Queen, smirked, and immediately activated teleportation, leading the fire spirit away from Posidonia. Returning to the floating temple, Alex, reflecting on it, realized how bizarre and ridiculous his battle with the Black Queen had been. "How is it going?" Emma had been waiting for Alex in the floating temple. Seeing Alex's return, she quickly stood up and eagerly asked, her eyes involuntarily darting to the fire spirit beside Alex. Alex had meticulously sculpted the fire spirit, making it look and feel remarkably lifelike. Its striking azure body, resembling a giant sapphire, was particularly striking. No wonder it caught Emma's eye. Noticing Emma's glance, Alex chuckled and explained the fire spirit's origins, then his expression darkened. "This is a very bad situation. Not only the Brotherhood of Mutants, But the Hellfire Club is involved too. Those scum, all the mutants in the floating temple harbored no regard for the Hellfire Club, especially the X-Men on the front lines. Sometimes they wished they could slash the Hellfire Club, who had brought the mutants to their current plight, into pieces. Alex then noticed a number of people standing in the vast floating temple. A quick glance revealed none of them, but they all looked familiar, likely high-ranking members of the mutant house, including the leaders of the X-Men. Alex glanced around, then finally returned his gaze to Emma. Thinking of the Posidonia lab, his expression suddenly darkened. On Posidonia, Alex had attempted to completely destroy it several times, but ultimately had to forgo it. What else? Emma, perceptive to the change in Alex, grew nervous. Something that had driven Alex this way couldn't be good news. Alex, coming to his senses, looked glum. After a long pause, he recounted what he had seen and heard at the lab. We must not let them go. Emma suddenly stood up, her expression agitated and a hint of fear lingering. Alex, oblivious to Emma's change of expression, lowered his head and said, "The Hellfire Club has a Black Queen with extraordinary powers." He then raised his head, turned to look at the X-Men, and said gravely, "I've been fighting her for a long time, and neither of us can defeat the other." This stirred up 1,000 waves. Alex was undoubtedly the most powerful in the mutant family, and even with all 6 powers, no one could rival him. Hearing Alex's words, a chill ran through everyone's heart, wondering if the Black Queen was really that powerful. Emma, sensing their thoughts and fearing to burden them, offered solace. "Strength isn't absolute. Perhaps there's something that can counter her." She glanced at Alex, motioning for him to speak up as well. Alex paused for a moment, then recovered his composure and offered a few words of comfort, finally calming the group. Chapter 202 Not Tight. After Alex's teleportation faded, the Black Queen landed calmly on the ground in Posidonia, her almond-shaped eyes gleaming with joy. As if struck by something, the Black Queen's lips curled up slightly, a triumphant chuckle that sent the nearby AIM fighters reeling. The Black Queen quickly recovered, her smile fading. She swept the crowd with a cold gaze, snorted, and swayed as she vanished. Not long after, in a luxuriously decorated office, Strucker leaned back in a white sharkskin chair, squinting across at the Black Queen with a sullen expression. "Black Queen, I need your explanation. I wasn't as skilled as him, and he got away," the Black Queen replied calmly, arms folded across her chest and squinting at Strucker. "Selena, don't try to fudge it." Strucker slammed his hands on the table and stood up angrily. The chair behind him was pushed into the corner, shattered into several pieces by the violent impact. Taking a deep breath, Stark spoke again, seeming to suppress his anger. "With your strength, it is not difficult to keep him." The Black Queen shook her head nonchalantly, not paying attention to Stark's roar at all, and explained slowly, "Alex's abilities are powerful and changeable. Even if my Hellfire Club comes out in full force, it is impossible to take him down." "I don't want to hear this." Stark waved his hand to interrupt the Black Queen's words, snorted coldly and glared at the Black Queen, threatening in a cold voice, "Kill Alex, then you can get what you want." The Black Queen's brows twitched unconsciously when she heard this, but soon smoothed it out. A cold light flashed in her eyes, and she stood up with a giggle. "Baron, don't worry, if Alex dares to come again next time, he will never come back." In order to get that thing, the Black Queen led the Hellfire Club to actively cooperate with AIM, and now they naturally cannot fail. Strucker glanced indifferently at the milky white of the Black Queen's deliberately exposed chest and said expressionlessly, "I don't want to be disappointed again." Leaving Strucker's office, the Black Queen's forced smile vanished, replaced by a deep indifference and a hint of murderous intent. She turned to glance at the closed door and said in a low voice, "I'll let you run rampant for a few more days." As the Black Queen left, Strucker followed her out of the office, not through the main entrance, but through a secret passage within the room. A short while later, Strucker arrived at a hidden laboratory, built on the seafloor thousands of meters from Posidonia. It was so secluded that no one except a few high-ranking AIM members knew about it. Of these people, only Strucker was out in the open, the others were conducting various research inside. Strucker wandered around the lab until he entered a separate chamber. Inside was a middle-aged man in a white lab coat. In front of him lay a dismembered corpse on a laboratory bed, its internal organs spread out beside it. "How is it going?" Strucker glanced at the dissected cadaver on the lab bed, then turned to the middle-aged man and asked in a low voice. The middle-aged man heard his voice, turned his head to look at Strucker, shook his head, and said, "Right now, it only works on mutants. To be more specific, it's the X gene. After a brief pause, the middle-aged man sighed, a look of frustration on his face. It has no effect on normal humans. Why don't we breed mutants ourselves? Strucker was deeply disappointed at this answer, complaining a little irritably. It can activate the X gene anyway. We can use it to create a mutant army for AIM. It was actually a genetic enhancement fluid, a product of AIM's research combined with alien technology from the Savage Lands. Unfortunately, this genetic enhancement fluid only targets the X gene, meaning mutants and potential mutants, and has no effect on human genes. At the Posidonia testing site, the fluid injected into the Brotherhood's mutants was also a genetic enhancement fluid, but it had been specially modified. Needless to say, the effect was poor, with an extremely high failure rate and mortality rate. Those who are not of my race must have different hearts. Mutants are not humans, and humans are not mutants. The middle-aged man shook his head firmly and strongly refuted Strucker's suggestion. Controlling them is countless times more dangerous and difficult than developing human gene enhancement fluid. Strucker looked at the middle-aged man with a depressed face and smiled bitterly. But, relying on the Winter Soldier alone, you can't intimidate them at all. One person can't do it, but it's different with weapons. The middle-aged man smiled mysteriously when he heard this, dragged Strucker out of the laboratory, and soon came to another laboratory. As soon as he entered the lab, Strucker couldn't help but burst into laughter. He pointed at a small, bazooka-like thing in the middle and shouted in surprise, "What is this?" "It's adapted from the anti-tank guns on the walls of Posidonia. It's much smaller and less powerful." The middle-aged man gently stroked the narrow barrel, his face showing a strange tenderness and unconcealed pride. "But it's more powerful than any weapon on Earth today. Even a superpowered person specializing in defense can't withstand it." Good. 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 Strucker excitedly looked up and down at the weapon in front of him, his eyes shining, and he said 3 good S in a row. After a while, Strucker finally thought of the key point. He turned his gaze from the weapon to the middle-aged man. "How is the production of this thing?" The middle-aged man glanced at Strucker and said nonchalantly, "It's easy to make. We have quite a few in the lab, enough to equip an entire division." Strucker was stunned for a moment, then burst into laughter again, repeatedly saying, "Great. With these weapons, I'm fully confident we can take down the floating temple." The middle-aged man tensed up at this. He grabbed Strucker's arm and solemnly ordered, "The floating temple must not be destroyed. It's the core of alien technology. As long as we thoroughly study it, conquering the world will be a piece of cake." The middle-aged man had been urging troops to attack the floating temple, precisely because of its alien technology. If it were destroyed, he would be heartbroken. "Don't worry, I'll handle it." After a few perfunctory words, Strucker quickly dispatched a division's worth of equipment from the lab, and the secret equipment remained hidden. Although allied with the Hellfire Club and the Brotherhood of Mutants, Strucker has always been wary of them and does not truly trust them. Strucker does not trust the Hellfire Club and the Brotherhood of Mutants. As the leader of the Hellfire Club, the Black Queen also does not trust AIM. If it were not for the inability to find a breakthrough, the Black Queen would not have cooperated with Strucker. Black Queen, there is still no news about the genetic enhancement fluid. The Black Queen had just returned to her place when someone immediately came forward to report the latest news. Since arriving in Posidonia, the Black Queen has never stopped secretly searching for the genetic enhancement fluid, but unfortunately there has been no news. In the past, upon hearing this news, the Black Queen would be angry and furious, but today the Black Queen just smiled lightly, looking indifferent. "Don't look for it for the time being. Wait a few days." If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 203 Internal Discussion. Not looking anymore. Upon hearing the Black Queen's words, everyone looked at her in surprise. The Hellfire Club had paid a huge price for the genetic optimization fluid, and now they were suddenly giving up, leaving many feeling a little resentful. Some of the more irritable ones stood up, angrily shouting, "Why aren't you looking anymore? Sit down." The Black Queen's expression suddenly turned cold. She glared at the man who had stood up, and said in a stern voice, "I'm in a good mood today, so I'll spare your life." The man's face paled and he began to tremble violently at the Black Queen's glare. The Black Queen was no pushover, and she had a reputation for killing people over a disagreement. Upon hearing the Black Queen's next words, the man stumbled and slumped into his chair. Then, as if struck by lightning, he stood up instantly and thanked the Black Queen profusely. After this, the atmosphere in the room suddenly quieted, and no one dared to speak again. With the matter unfinished, the Black Queen didn't want to explain. After a few bland remarks, she turned and left, leaving a dozen people staring at each other in bewilderment. The Hellfire Club's members were mostly in awe of the Black Queen, whose temperament was far from perfect, and countless lives had been lost at her hands. However, in addition to her strength, the Black Queen's tactics were equally formidable, which was why she had been able to maintain her position as the supreme ruler of the Hellfire Club. The remaining members exchanged glances, recalling the Black Queen's past tactics, and began to depart, their anticipation growing stronger as she promised, "We'll see the outcome in a few days." Meanwhile, at the floating temple, Alex, Emma, and the others, after a brief discussion, formulated a plan to counter the combined forces of AIM, the Hellfire Club, and the Brotherhood of Mutants. They began actively recruiting personnel, establishing defenses, and awaiting the combined forces. Alex had originally advocated for an offensive, but this was aborted by the strong opposition of Emma and the others, ultimately resulting in a passive counterattack. With Emma around, Alex rarely took on specific tasks. After the discussion, Alex pondered for a moment and headed towards Academy X, ready to find a place to train. Sharpening one's skills before battle is always a good idea. After more than a decade of continuous development, Academy X has grown from its humble beginnings into the largest facility in the floating temple, boasting a comprehensive range of facilities and the introduction of a variety of high-tech equipment to aid teaching and training. Easily finding a vacant combat training room, Alex quickly warmed up and began to work. He unleashed a crucible punch, a chokehold, and other battlefield techniques he'd learned from Logan. In just 10 minutes, the set was complete. Alex paused, breathing softly, looking down at his hands with a look of disappointment on his face. During practice, Alex inevitably thought of Mandarin's martial arts. Compared to them, Alex felt his own fighting skills were barely even up to par. Thinking of Mandarin and his martial arts, Alex couldn't help but think of the Ancient One, the legendary wizard from the Mystic Valley in the snowy region. The more he thought about it, the more restless Alex became, and he lost all interest in practicing. After a moment's hesitation, Alex teleported out of the combat training room. When he reappeared, he had arrived at the Mystic Valley. To Alex's disappointment, the smoke shrouding the uncanny valley had dissipated, and naturally, the Ancient One was nowhere to be found. Alex searched the valley for a long time, but found nothing. Having left with high hopes, only to return disappointed, Alex's mood darkened. After a moment's thought, he turned and left the X Academy, heading towards the X-Men's compound. Since the X-Men's official formation, Emma had specially designated a dedicated area within the floating temple for the X-Men's living and resting places. Naturally, there were also various training facilities, more advanced than those at the X Academy, and the training was more effective. However, Alex hadn't come here to train, he simply wanted to find someone to fight and let off steam. Upon learning of Alex's intentions, the X-Men gathered around, each excited. The opportunity to spar with Alex wasn't something they often encountered, and many X-Men from further afield even rushed back. The commotion was so loud that even Emma was startled. Alex hadn't anticipated such a commotion, but it was clearly impossible to back out at this point. Fortunately, Alex hadn't initially suggested it was a simple fight, otherwise a loss would have been humiliating. In terms of fighting ability alone, Alex wouldn't claim to surpass all the X-Men, but in terms of overall strength, Alex was quite confident. Because so many people participated, and many wanted to spectate, the sparring was eventually moved to the X School. The X School had a large sports field, which had been temporarily converted into a fighting arena, which was perfectly adequate. Alex was naturally the first to take the stage. Standing in the center, his already restless spirit only intensified, his body shaking with impatience. A surge of rage suddenly gripped Alex, though Alex didn't notice it. Soon, his first opponent appeared. It was none other than Raimi, codenamed Gambit. "Why are you here?" Alex was surprised to see Raimi. He was now a household name in Hollywood. What was he doing here when he wasn't filming in Hollywood? Raimi waved his cane, smiled wickedly, and said, "Just finished filming, and need to rest for a while." Alex nodded non-committally, then said softly, "All right, Come on." Without waiting for Remy's nod, Alex attacked Remy first. At first, both the men were somewhat restrained, using only punches and kicks. But Remy, who had learned his fighting style from Alex, found his stride after a while, and after a while, Remy began to struggle. Alex seized the opportunity and landed a steady hand strike on Remy's neck. If that had been executed, Remy would have been crippled, if not killed. Seeing Alex's clean and decisive finish, the audience erupted in cheers, both for Alex and for Remy. No mistakes, one song, one post, one content, 1/6, 1/9, one book, one forum. Look. Alex chuckled and let go of Remy. He stepped back a few steps and said slowly, "I heard that your ability is very powerful. Give it a try." Remy hesitated for a moment, nodded, and warned in a low voice, "Be careful, superpowers are different from fists and kicks. No matter how fierce the fight is, there are rarely any casualties. But superpowers are different. Danger can arise if you are not careful. Come on." Alex chuckled and signaled Remy to attack. "I'm waiting for you." Remy no longer hesitated after hearing that. He waved his hand and threw out a playing card at an extremely fast speed. Alex did not dodge and took the initiative to approach the playing card. Alex had also heard about Remy's ability. It was somewhat similar to the energy ball of the Alien Tower sim. As expected, the moment Alex approached, the playing card exploded. Not bad, but a little weak. Chapter 204 Guidance, Part 1. Hearing Alex's assessment, the usually proud Remy felt a little annoyed. Disregarding Alex's status, he snorted coldly and threw out a dozen playing cards at once, covering a large area in front of Alex. The spinning, straight-line cards flew faster and faster, their energy steadily increasing, becoming significantly more powerful than the previous card. Alex frowned slightly, shifting his gaze from the cards to Remy, and asked with some confusion, "Can't you control their flight?" The card's trajectory was straightforward, moving back and forth. Though fast, dodging them was easy. Remy hadn't expected Alex to see the weakness in his ability immediately, and his desire to compete with him was immediately lost. He paused awkwardly, looking at Alex with a wry smile, and said with a somewhat languid tone, "I can't control them." Alex said nothing more. With a single wave of his hand, he gathered all 10 cards, feeling them carefully before throwing one out. The card flew straight out, uncontrollably controlled by Alex. It exploded a few meters later. "I'll try again." Alex's interest in sparring faded, and he became intensely interested in Remy's card. A moment later, Alex threw another card. This time, he manipulated the energy within the card, controlling its flight. Under Alex's control, the card's trajectory became more complex, its movements like a ghost. If you weren't paying attention, you'd lose track of it. By the time you reacted, it had already exploded nearby. Few people knew of Alex's energy control abilities, and the crowd gasped in amazement at how quickly and perfectly Alex mastered Remy's cards. Remy, one of the few who knew of Alex's abilities, immediately thought of energy control. He wasn't overly surprised, just a touch envious. But when Alex threw the third card, Remy's expression finally changed, a look of surprise. After the third card, the fourth, the fifth. The bustling stadium gradually quieted, everyone staring, transfixed, as Alex continued to fling cards. Starting with the third card, the cards flew with a jerky, tiny arc, then the last card spun in a vast, graceful arc, passing in front of Remy and behind him. In the stands, Emma wore a faint smile, her beautiful eyes fixed on Alex, standing in the center of the field. With a hint of pride and boastfulness, she said, "I knew he'd be an excellent teacher." From Remy's expression, which shifted from shock to admiration, Emma saw his eagerness, and that was precisely what a teacher needed, to spark a student's interest in learning and progress. Alex had accomplished that. If you control the force and angle, the cards can fly in an S shape, or even more complex trajectories. Tessa, beside Emma, pursed her lips and remarked subconsciously. After realizing Alex's intention, Tessa began calculating with her computer-like mind, various trajectories, the forces required, and the angles required, all appeared in her mind. Emma was startled for a moment, then turned to look at Tessa. Later, "You'll teach at X Academy." Tessa's words made Emma realize she'd been wasting Tessa's abilities. His computer-like brain and high-speed, massive processing power, if used for teaching, it would save countless hours. Just like Remy's abilities, with Tessa's guidance, he'd surely master the control of the flying cards in no time. On the field, Alex emptied a dozen playing cards, then turned to Remy with a bright smile, seemingly releasing much of the pent-up frustration. Remy looked at Alex gratefully and bowed solemnly. "Thank you for your guidance, teacher." Alex nodded casually, turned his head, and shouted, "Anyone else?" Instantly, the entire crowd of tens of thousands erupted, desperately trying to rush onto the field. It had been a simple sparring match, and while many dared to participate, it was definitely not this intense. But now, things were different. Besides sparring, there was also coaching. Everyone was beside themselves. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and many of the less capable and weaker were eager to take action. As the situation grew increasingly chaotic, Alex's suppressed anxiety inexplicably surfaced again, and nameless rage flaring up. If Alex hadn't retained some sense, he would have exploded right then and there. Even so, the anger on Alex's face was genuine, and even his voice was tinged with anger. "Everyone, sit down." With those words, tinged with a hint of anger, the noisy stadium fell silent. Everyone obediently returned to their seats, sitting upright, not daring to move. In the stands, Emma's smiling face flickered with surprise. Alex's temper wasn't exactly good, but it wasn't bad either. His sudden anger seemed strange and a bit strange. Just as she was about to ask a question, Emma noticed Alex had returned to his normal self. There was no trace of anger at all. While Emma was perplexed, Alex faced his second challenger, Darwin, who had joined Charles. Ever since the Cuban Missile Crisis, when Charles and the others were brought in, Alex had rarely interacted with them, aside from occasionally asking Alex to copy their abilities. So, upon seeing Darwin, Alex was incredibly enthusiastic, making up for his neglect over the past 6 months. Darwin was taken aback by Alex's enthusiasm, and after finally calming down, he finally spoke. "Mr. Alex, what do you think I should do from now on?" Darwin's mutant ability was radical, theoretically granting him near immortality, something Alex greatly envied. However, it was undeniable that Darwin's ability, while great, was also quite useless, rendering him practically useless in combat, except under certain circumstances. Thinking of Darwin's abilities, Alex frowned slightly and said thoughtfully, "Let's have a sparring match first, and see what happens." Alex knew of Darwin's abilities, but he had never witnessed the specifics of radicalization firsthand. Hearing Alex's words, Darwin hesitated. Due to his limited abilities, his training at the CIA focused on combat skills. But compared to Alex, the gap was too great, and Darwin felt embarrassed. "Don't worry, I just want to see your abilities and their potential." Alex, seeing through Darwin's thoughts, chuckled and reassured him, "Strength of ability is important, but potential is equally important." Hearing Alex's words, Darwin no longer hesitated, struck a starting stance, and lunged at Alex. Chapter 205 Guidance, Part 2. Darwin's fighting ability was admittedly quite poor. Not only was his footwork unsteady, but his grip was also lacking in strength. Alex's gentle push sent him stumbling and falling. Had Alex not seen the opportunity and intervened, he would have nearly fallen flat on his face. Holding Darwin steady, Alex looked him up and down before striking him in the chest. The blow was gentle, a test. Darwin instinctively tried to dodge, but noticing Alex's expression, he paused. The spectators on the sidelines were stunned by Darwin's performance, and their confusion only deepened after they saw Alex's movements. Just as they were wondering, they were astonished to see Darwin's chest transform. The moment Alex's fist landed, it became as hard as steel, gleaming with a unique metallic quality. "Is this radicalization?" Emma's expression on the sidelines shone with surprise. She had long heard of Charles and the others Alex had brought back, but she'd been too busy to meet them. Seeing them today was truly remarkable. Emma, like Alex, held this type of radicalization in high esteem. This near immortality was something many dreamed of. More importantly, its potential was immense. Imagine evolving the ability to dominate your opponent in battle, not to mention victory, but at least invincibility. In the field, Alex slowly shifted his gaze from Darwin's chest and looked up at him, surprised. So fast, Darwin's radicalization was far faster than Alex had anticipated. The moment her fist made contact with his chest, he had already developed steel skin. The speed was terrifying. It depends. Simple things will be quicker, but complex things will take time. Darwin watched as Alex retracted his fist, the steel skin on his chest disappearing. A hint of bitterness crossed his dark face. "If we don't catch up, there's still danger. Radicalization takes time, sometimes faster, sometimes slower. If it's not completed before a threat destroys the body, the person will die, just like in the movie when Sebastian Shaw blasted Darwin with Alex's energy. Oh? Try again, Alex exclaimed in surprise, his interest piqued. A red shock beam shot out from his chest. However, under Alex's control, the red shock beam didn't immediately strike Darwin. Instead, it was deliberately released bit by bit, starting with a strand as thin as a hair, then spreading across his fingers, arms, and thighs, gradually growing larger and thicker, its power increasing. Darwin's performance impressed many, and his radicalization also shocked everyone present. When the first hair-thick shock beam struck Darwin, his body instantly transformed. The red beam's impact point felt like red-hot cast iron, its fiery glow engulfing it. As the beam grew larger and stronger, Darwin's entire body transformed, like a rock unmoved in magma, red light flickering through the cracks that appeared, yet it remained unbroken. At this point, Alex stopped intensifying his attack, noticing the pain on Darwin's face. He had reached his limit, and any further damage would have shattered him. With the red beam removed, Darwin's body gradually recovered, transforming from a red rock monster into a normal human within a minute. Alex frowned again as he watched Darwin, now fully restored to normal, turning around and pacing back and forth, chin in hand. Darwin didn't dare interrupt, but stood quietly by and waited. He truly needed Alex's guidance. Being a universal punching bag wasn't Darwin's plan. Can't you maintain or actively control your ability to radicalize? Alex paused after a long pause, turned to Darwin, and asked expectantly. Darwin shook his head. He'd had this idea for a long time, but had tried without success. The ability to radicalize only worked under specific conditions, actively exerting it wasn't feasible. Alex glanced at Darwin with disappointment, then a thought struck him. His eyes gleamed, and he asked again, "So, how are you feeling now?" Darwin looked at Alex with some confusion. After a moment's thought, he nodded, his expression somewhat subdued. "Not bad." Alex paused, then explained with some surprise, "That shouldn't be the case. Your body absorbed all the energy from the impact beam just now. You couldn't possibly not feel anything." But I really didn't feel anything at all. Darwin's face grew even more bitter, and he waved his fists helplessly. The weak, limp fists and the feeble power of his punches showed that Darwin's condition remained exactly the same, with no improvement at all. Alex had been observing Darwin's radicalization and was certain that all the energy from the previous red impact beam had been absorbed by Darwin's body. But now, Darwin was clearly unchanged. Confused, Alex reached out and grasped Darwin's hand, carefully sensing the energy within him. "I understand." After a moment, Alex smiled, looking sideways at Darwin and explaining, "The energy is still within you, it just hasn't been absorbed by your cells, which is why nothing has changed." Alex paused briefly before adding, "I suspect your radicalization abilities haven't disappeared either, they remain within you. If you want to actively utilize them, you need to discover and explore them yourself." Really, Darwin knew his abilities. If, as Alex claimed, all his radicalization abilities could be actively utilized, then he wouldn't have to worry about his combat effectiveness declining. Beyond anything else, his iron skin alone would multiply his strength several times over. Alex smiled and nodded, his face filled with assurance. "I believe you'll definitely carve out your own path." As he spoke, Alex disabled his invisibility and copied Darwin's ability, intending to study it himself. After thanking Alex with great gratitude, Darwin returned to the stands with a delighted look on his face. Charles and the others had already gathered around him, each one beaming with joy. As friends, they were naturally happy that Darwin could improve his skills. On the field, after seeing Darwin off, Alex looked around again. Before Alex could speak, someone jumped out, sprinting, fearing someone else would take their place. The unexpected competition ultimately turned into an open coaching session, with people constantly appearing on and off the field. Alex, without a hint of impatience, diligently instructed everyone. In fact, not only did those who took to the field benefit greatly, but even those sitting on the sidelines benefited immensely, leaving everyone extremely satisfied. Seeing the positive results, Emma even asked Alex to hold more open sessions, but Alex declined. After a day of discussion and learning, Alex's sullen mood disappeared, and he became cheerful. "I didn't forget to congratulate Villager Jay on becoming a moderator, the first Scorpio moderator. Congratulations." Chapter 206 I'm sick. After a day of public instruction, Alex's reputation within the mutant house rose again. Now, as he walked the streets of the floating island, people were constantly greeting him, some even approaching him for autographs. Alex had never experienced anything like this before, and his hands trembled as he signed. However, Alex's mood brightened, and he even offered to help Emma with some tasks and set up defenses. "What's wrong with you?" Emma looked at him with a strange expression. Alex had always avoided any intellectual tasks, but his sudden enthusiasm was a bit of a shock to Emma. "Since coming back from AIM, you've been weird. It's like you've become a different person," Alex pouted, angrily yelling, "Isn't it good for me to help out?" Alex knew his mood had fluctuated quite a bit over the past 2 days, but he brushed it off, chalking it up to the AIM lab. After a day of dedicated work alongside Emma, as night fell, Alex rubbed his forehead with a weary expression as he followed Emma back to the floating temple. Still no response from Stark, Alex asked, surprised, slumping down in a chair beside the holographic console. Turning to look at Howard next to him, he asked. Ever since returning from Posidonia, Alex had been waiting for Stark and his men to make a move, but for days, Stark hadn't made a single move. Even the dinosaur army, which had been preparing to depart, seemed to have retreated. This inexplicably fueled Alex's anxiety, and he had already secretly sent several people to investigate. Upon hearing Alex's voice, Howard turned his gaze from the holographic console and looked Alex up and down, as if he were a monster. His expression was filled with wonder, and he said in a strange voice, "It's rare for a lazy guy to take the initiative." Word of Alex's offer of help had already reached Howard, since he was now practically a permanent resident of the floating temple. Alex was deeply embarrassed by Howard's words. He wanted to retort, but thinking of his own past, he could only chuckle and change the subject, trying to put on a serious expression. "I'm asking you a question, be serious." Unfortunately, Howard wasn't buying it. He leered at Alex, saying nothing, just staring. Alex, truly enraged, growled softly, reached out and clamped his hands around Howard's head, threatening fiercely, "Tell me, are you going to tell me or not? Tell me, I'll tell you." Howard, restrained, begged with a flushed face. After a moment of arguing, the two men sat down in silence, their expressions uncertain. Could it be that they were up to something else? Alex frowned, looking at Posidonia on the holographic console, thinking of that vast experimental field. With AIM's scientific prowess, coupled with access to alien technology from this desolate land, who knows how far they'll advance? Emma sat off to the side, her face equally melancholic, her gaze constantly scanning the holographic map. She felt a mixture of regret and self-blame. Back then, I should have wiped them out. Emma was referring to the time when AIM had first arrived in the Savage Lands, before they had fully mastered the alien technology. Alex patted Emma's hand, chuckling comfortingly. "It's my fault for not noticing their arrival sooner. Otherwise, so much trouble wouldn't have happened." Howard watched Alex and Emma clasping hands, a pang of sadness welling in his heart. He muttered to himself, "Shouldn't I go back to New York too?" Alex was diligent for only one day. The next day, his laziness struck again, and he spent the entire day in the floating temple, doing nothing but sitting sickly at the holographic console, vacant and dazed. Before he knew it, another 2 days had passed, and Alex's condition was becoming increasingly strange. After another busy day, Em returned from outside. The first thing she saw was Alex, slumped over the holographic console, half asleep. She'd seen him like this the previous day, and he was just like this again today. Emma finally realized something was amiss. Alex was always full of energy, the exhaustion he'd been feeling these past 2 days was unheard of. She nudged Alex awake, looking worriedly at him as he rubbed his eyes. "Alex, what's wrong with you?" Alex, still barely conscious, mumbled and groaned, barely understanding what Emma was saying. Emma grabbed Alex's shoulders, shook him vigorously, and repeated her question. "What's wrong?" Alex finally came to, looking bewildered at Emma's question. Emma frowned, staring at Alex for a long moment before she said seriously, "Alex, do you know how much sleep you've gotten these past 2 days?" "Sleep?" Alex paused, then blushed awkwardly. "I've been so tired these past few days, so I slept a lot." Alex knew how he'd been feeling these past few days. He'd become sleepy just sitting there, uncontrollably so, and before he knew it, he'd collapsed and fallen asleep. Alex's explanation didn't relax Emma, but instead intensified her anxiety. "Do you think this is normal?" Alex was about to open his mouth to explain when a pretty figure sprinted over, threw her arms around Alex's neck, and passionately left a bright red lipstick mark on Alex's cheek. "Monroe, why are you here?" Gently hugging Monroe, who refused to get up, Alex glanced apologetically at Emma. He turned to look at Monroe, a look of surprise on his face. Although Monroe was obsessed with Alex, she knew the situation. She stayed in Alex's arms for a moment before standing up. "The new movie is over, so we're here for vacation." After explaining to Alex, Monroe turned to Emma and asked in surprise, "Emma, what's wrong with you?" As soon as she entered, Monroe noticed that Emma looked unwell. Emma hesitated for a moment, then finally told her about Alex's recent condition. After listening to Emma's account, Monroe tilted her head and looked at Alex. Emma's description sounded exactly like her own reaction when she was sick, so she hesitated and asked, "Could he be sick?" Emma was stunned by this and turned to look at Alex, somewhat surprised. Alex had a very good physique, she had never seen him sick before. But after Monroe's reminder, Emma realized that this might be the case. Don't assume that mutants are immune to illness. On the contrary, due to their special genetics, mutants are more susceptible to illness, and these illnesses are a constant throughout their lives. "Do you want to see a doctor?" Monroe was worried that Alex might be sick. She grabbed Alex's hand and asked with concern. Emma quickly stood up and started to make arrangements while speaking, "I'll get someone over right away." Chapter 207, Terminally Ill. The giant floating island is very well equipped with all necessary facilities, and there is naturally no shortage of hospitals, which are right next to the X Academy. Not long after Emma's telepathic communication, a young man dressed in golden clothes ran in quickly, with a hint of excitement on his round face. Since joining the mutant house, this is his first time to set foot on the floating temple. "Joshua, come and see Alex." Seeing the newcomer, Emma hurriedly called out, pointing at Alex, who was sitting in a chair with a wry smile on his face, and looked a little anxious. Alex didn't think he was sick, but now neither Emma nor Monroe would allow him to raise any objections, so he could only passively accept it. However, seeing that the newcomer didn't bring anything, Alex couldn't help but feel a little surprised. Could he still be learning the look, listen, ask, and feel method of traditional Chinese medicine? As if sensing Alex's confusion, Emma pointed at the blonde young man and introduced him. "This is Joshua Foley. His ability is to heal others' injuries and illnesses. There's no ailment he can't cure. He's the most important medical expert in the mutant family and a member of the X-Men." Such an ability. Alex stared at the shy young man in astonishment. Although he knew mutants had all sorts of abilities, he had never imagined such an ability. "It's like a panacea." Emma chuckled and pointed at Joshua, saying, "Joshua's codename is Panacea." Joshua smiled modestly, glanced at Alex, and reached out to grasp Alex's hand. His golden form suddenly brightened, becoming even more dazzling. Alex glanced down at Joshua's hand, then began to examine him from head to toe. He was filled with curiosity about his abilities, even tempted to replicate them. Alex was lost in thought when he suddenly felt his hand loosen, snapping awake. He looked up to see Joshua looking at him with a serious frown. He couldn't help but ask, "What's wrong?" Nearby, Emma and Monroe also noticed something was wrong with Joshua. Their hearts skipped a beat, and they panicked, asking, "What's wrong, Joshua?" "The teacher's body is filled with a strange toxin, and my abilities can't dispel it." Joshua glanced at Alex, then turned to Emma, explaining with a hint of tears in his eyes, "The toxin is very stubborn. No sooner do I dispel it than it resurfaces. It's impossible to dispel it, poisoned." Alex looked at Joshua with a look of absurdity, suddenly thinking of the quack doctors in his past life, and he felt a little angry. Emma didn't believe Joshua at first. How could Alex be poisoned? But when she secretly used telepathy to search Joshua's consciousness, she saw that every cell in Alex's body was covered in a layer of black, and his face was pale, devoid of any color. How could this happen? Emma slumped down in her chair, looking up at Joshua with a look of panic on her face. "Is there really no cure?" Joshua smiled wryly and shook his head, his expression somewhat gloomy. "My ability is still too weak." Seeing Joshua and Emma chatting back and forth, ignoring him, Alex angrily grabbed Joshua's hand, abandoning Alex's ability and copying Joshua's. "I want to see what's wrong with me." Thinking this, Alex activated Joshua's ability. Instantly, Alex saw his own body. It wasn't the observation and perception controlled by energy, but a real-life vision, as if under a high-powered microscope, with every cell clearly visible. However, to Alex's horror, Alex discovered that every cell in his body was completely covered in a layer of black. Every cell in his body, without exception. What the hell? Alex was horrified by the darkness within his body and looked up at Joshua, confusion and deep fear. Alex was convinced he'd been poisoned, but he had no idea when or where he'd been poisoned. Joshua glanced at Alex and continued answering Emma's question. At this stage, the toxin hasn't penetrated any cells. It's only affecting the teacher's body for now, not life-threatening. He paused, frowning, and after a moment's hesitation, he continued, however, I can't say for sure what will happen in the future. I don't know what this toxin is. Alex fell silent. Joshua's implication was simple, his life was in danger at any moment. Alex panicked, trying to recall where he might have been poisoned, but he couldn't find any clues. In a matter of moments, several people had already heard the news and rushed over. Crystal, before Howard could, sat down next to Alex and asked with a smirk, Alex, have you been provoking anyone lately? Mandolin. Alex hadn't encountered many enemies since waking from his slumber, and the first person he thought of was Mandarin. Everyone fell silent after hearing Alex's response. They had all heard from Alex about the Mandarin's mistaken power, and since they came from the mysterious East, poisoning was highly likely. Seeing his position taken away, Howard simply stood in front of Alex. After a moment of contemplation, he turned to look at Joshua and asked, Joshua, could you extract some of the toxins so I can create an antidote? While Howard wasn't an expert, he knew someone who could, which was why he offered this advice. Joshua nodded and was about to reach out to grab Alex's hand when he noticed a black mass of material already on Alex's palm, enveloped by a transparent energy shield. It was the toxin in Alex's body. Howard pulled out a glass bottle from somewhere and prepared to contain the toxin. But something surprising happened. The toxin instantly turned to ash after leaving the energy barrier, then completely vanished, as if it had never existed. What's going on? Everyone was slightly stunned, and then turned to look at Joshua. Even Alex did not leave. Although he copied Joshua's ability, Alex knew that knowledge and experience could not be copied, and this was Joshua's most important asset. As expected, Joshua was slightly shocked after seeing this scene, and his face suddenly changed drastically, as if he had seen something horrifying. It's energy toxins. Energy toxins. The strange name left everyone puzzled. Energy toxins refer to a class of toxins that spread and parasitize through energy. They are extremely vicious. Joshua took a deep breath and explained solemnly, once poisoned, it is almost impossible to dispel it because the human body is full of energy, except for death. Everyone was stunned when they heard this, and Monroe even burst into tears on the spot. Alex was also a little confused. After a while, he suddenly thought of something and gritted his teeth and said, Black Queen. Chapter 282 to listen to. The Black Queen. Upon hearing Alex's words, everyone turned to look, some in surprise, some in worry. When Joshua mentioned the energy toxin, Alex recalled the battle with the Black Queen on Posidonia. There had been a strange feeling throughout that battle, and now it was clear the Black Queen had orchestrated it, intent on poisoning him. After hearing Alex's explanation, Emma stood up, her face gloomy, her eyes narrowed in a chilling glint. Her voice was like a volcano about to erupt. Call out X-Men immediately. I will destroy Posidonia. If the X-Academy was Emma's heart, then Alex was her soul. Anyone who dared harm Alex would be punished. Seeing Emma's reaction, Alex quickly reached out to stop her, shouting at Tessa, who was about to call for help. Shaking his head, he said, Don't worry, I'll go meet the Black Queen. Judging by the level of toxins in his system, Alex knew the Black Queen wasn't in a hurry to kill him, so she must have other plans. I'll go with you, Emma shouted eagerly as Alex finished speaking. She clutched Alex's arm tightly, looking up at him with a determined look on her face. Alex hesitated for a moment before nodding and agreeing, I'll take you, but don't act rashly. Before, Alex had been at best wary of the Black Queen, but now he felt even more terrified. The ability to silently poison someone without them realizing it was unmatched by ordinary people. Can you take me with you? Joshua asked quietly, watching Alex and Emma separate again. Before they could turn, he offered, if the poison was planted by the Black Queen, after I've dealt with it, I might be able to find a way to save the teacher. Emma's excitement instantly grew at Joshua's words, and she was about to agree without a second thought. But Alex refused. Thank you for your kindness, Joshua. Noticing Joshua's downcast expression, Alex chuckled, patted his shoulder, and explained, Joshua, it's not safe over there. It's very dangerous for you to follow us. I'm not afraid of danger. Joshua looked at Alex seriously, his emotions growing a little intense. I just want to heal the teacher. Alex's reputation within the mutant family was immense, especially among the original mutants, whom Alex had almost single-handedly saved from the war. They were deeply grateful to Alex, and Joshua was one of them, having been a mere child. Alex was taken aback for a moment, then shook his head again in denial. Joshua, thank you very much, but I've copied your abilities, so you'll be able to heal me. I'm sure you'll. Joshua paused for a moment, then regained consciousness. He nodded with a look of disappointment and stepped aside. Alex patted Joshua's shoulder again and, without stopping, teleported immediately to Posidonia with Emma. Having forgotten his invisibility and the red shock beam, Alex was extremely cautious. He teleported dozens of times upon arriving in Posidonia before finally finding a secluded and safe place to stop. Where is this? Emma turned and surveyed her surroundings, her expression still tinged with anger. Alex remained silent, secretly locking onto an AIM soldier nearby, telepathically searching for the Black Queen's location. Unfortunately, the AIM soldier didn't know, so Alex had to switch targets. Emma noticed Alex's movements and began searching with telepathy as well. After searching for 3 or 4 people, Emma was the first to find the Black Queen and even unexpectedly learned about the genetic enhancement fluid. It seems the Black Queen wants this. Alex's face flickered with realization upon hearing Emma's information, and he thought of the Brotherhood mutants at the experimental site. But I don't think Stryker would ever give the genetic enhancement fluid to the Black Queen, so, she wants you. Emma, perceptive, instantly understood the Black Queen's intentions. She wants to join forces with us and turn against Stryker. Alex also realized what was going on, but the details would have to wait until he met the Black Queen. After wandering around the vast Posidonia for most of the day, Alex and Emma finally found the Hellfire Club's base in the area, the real base. Alex and Emma visited the location they had learned from the AIM soldiers, but aside from a couple of kittens, there wasn't anyone there who could speak, let alone the Black Queen. Desperate, the two continued their search, finally finding this hidden retreat after a chance encounter with a core member of the Hellfire Club who was out wandering. So, when Alex and Emma entered openly, the entire hall erupted in chaos. Nearly 100 people emerged from every corner, each one a look of surprise, disbelief, and deep wariness. The standoff didn't last long. The Black Queen soon appeared. Upon seeing Alex and Emma, she chuckled softly, dismissed the crowd, and led them to a private room. I didn't expect you'd find out so quickly. After inviting Alex and Emma to sit down, the Black Queen slowly sat down across from them. Glancing at Alex, she said with a hint of surprise, I was going to send someone to inform you. What do you want? Alex asked in a deep voice, his brow furrowed, his expression cold. The Black Queen hadn't expected Alex to be so direct. His presence was already a disadvantage, and to say so would be like being exploited. But knowing Alex, the Black Queen knew this wasn't his style. Hesitant, the Black Queen didn't speak directly, instead offering a slangy response. Well, I suppose I don't need to say anything. Seeing Alex's initial response, Emma felt a surge of anxiety. Hearing the Black Queen's words, she wanted to speak up and seize the initiative. Alex, however, had a plan. He tightened his grip on Emma's hand slightly, silencing her. Then, turning to the Black Queen, she asked frankly, what do you want to do? Ever since learning about the genetic enhancement fluid, Alex had developed some ideas. If the Black Queen's demands weren't excessive, Alex wouldn't mind collaborating with her. Join the Hellfire Club. Together, we can rule the world. The Black Queen's words filled her with joy, and without hesitation, she spoke with a look of pride. Alex curled his lips, feeling completely confused by their groundless ambitions. He smiled non-committally and asked, should I listen to you, or should you listen to me? Chapter 209 Death or Surrender. Hearing Alex's question, the Black Queen was suddenly stunned. After a long pause, she laughed and said, we are equals. You are the Black King and I am the Black Queen. Where's the Supreme King? Alex was relentless. The most powerful person in the Hellfire Club was the Supreme King. The reason why the Black Queen was so powerful in the Hellfire Club was because she was also the Supreme King. The Black Queen had not expected Alex to be so difficult. After hesitating for a while, she put on an open-minded look and said generously, for the stability of the club, I will be the concurrent position at the beginning. After it stabilizes, the position of Supreme King will be given to you. Alex stared at the Black Queen for a long time, and suddenly smiled coldly. With a look of disdain, he said, "Let's not beat around the bush. Black Queen, just say what you want to say, otherwise it will be bad if there is any unpleasantness in the future." Although he could not explore the Black Queen's inner motives, Alex was sure that the Black Queen's words were false. Just talking about stability, who knew when it would be achieved? She simply doesn't want power, and who knows, she might even turn against him. The Black Queen's expression darkened. She stared at Alex, and after a long silence, she said coldly, "I'm sure you see my sincerity. This is my promise, and I won't go back on it. Looks like we're going to break up." Hearing the Black Queen's words, Alex knew there was no room for negotiation. The Black Queen's promise was only the position of Black King, perhaps even a vacant one. How could Alex possibly agree to this? After all, if Alex joined the Hellfire Club, the mutant house would also be incorporated. A mere position of Black King wouldn't reassure Alex. Seeing Alex shake his head in silence, the Black Queen's expression completely chilled. Her beautiful eyes slowly closed, and she leaned back in her chair, saying nonchalantly, "Last chance, last time, you've got the wrong person." Alex, undeterred by the Black Queen's tricks, snorted coldly, grabbed the dazed Emma, teleported away, and left, leaving the astonished Black Queen staring at the empty space across from her, her face bewildered. In the floating temple, no one left, awaiting news from Alex. When Alex returned with Emma, everyone rushed over, a flurry of questions. What happened? Almost everyone asked the same question, anxious and frantic. Emma finally came to her senses and looked up at Alex, bewildered. She couldn't understand Alex's actions. Why not just agree first and take it slow? Alex shook his head and said calmly, "It's not necessary." "What do you mean by not necessary?" The crowd, puzzled by the cryptic exchange between Alex and Emma, began to question him. Alex soothed Emma, who was on the verge of a rage, and then quieted everyone down before recounting his conversation with the Black Queen. It had been a simple exchange, consisting of nothing more than conditions and promises. "Why didn't you agree?" Everyone shared Emma's sentiment. With Alex's strength and the influence of the mutant family, even joining the Hellfire Club would easily allow him to become one and replace them. Alex shook his head, glancing around seriously, and said in a deep voice, "You overestimate me and our strength." After a pause, Alex gave a bitter smile and said with some resignation, "The Hellfire Club has never been solely about mutants. Humans also have a significant presence within it." Back then, with Sebastian Shaw's strength and influence, he had expended countless efforts to gain control of the Hellfire Club, ultimately using Alex to eliminate an inhuman leader. Although the Black Queen now controls the Hellfire Club, humans remain resilient, holding a significant numerical advantage. Therefore, even if Alex and the mutant family joined the Hellfire Club, it would be easy for the Black Queen to destabilize or even eliminate Alex. The humans in the Hellfire Club would be more than happy to help the Black Queen eliminate Alex, their hatred for him far greater than hers. After hearing Alex's explanation, everyone was stunned. Emma paused for a moment, then looked at Alex with a panicked expression. With a glimmer of hope, she slowly asked, "So, have you found an antidote?" The already distraught crowd shuddered at this, remembering that Alex had copied Joshua's abilities and might have found an antidote from the Black Queen. Alex's calm and composed demeanor reassured everyone. But to their disappointment, Alex simply shook his head. "Then let's join the Hellfire Club." "It's nothing," Emma said, her expression a mixture of laughter and tears, a heartbreaking sight. Emma had poured countless hours into the mutant house, and her contributions to its current prosperity were irreplaceable. Initially, Emma disagreed with the idea of the mutant house joining the Hellfire Club. But thinking of Alex's safety, Emma had to make the decision, even though it grieved her heart. Alex gently embraced Emma and said solemnly, "Even if I die, the mutant house will never join the Hellfire Club, let alone associate with those ambitious and dissolute people." Emma buried her head in Alex's chest and soon burst into tears. Emma's sobs seemed to tug at everyone's heartstrings. Monroe hugged Alex from behind, threw herself on his back, and sobbed, almost breathlessly. Crystal stood aside, watching the two women and Alex. She paused and didn't move forward, her eyes reddening. Hearing the two women's mournful cries, everyone grew agitated. Howard glared at Joshua, berating him. Finally, he asked, somewhat unwillingly, "Is there really no way? Even with current medical technology, it can't be cured, not to mention current medical technology, even decades from now, there won't be a cure." Joshua, unmoved by Howard's sarcasm, shook his head, a heavy expression on his face. But I still have room for improvement. Right now, I'm only at the cellular level. Once I reach the genetic level, I can definitely cure you. Hearing Joshua's confident words, everyone turned to look, a dozen eyes gleaming with hope, even Alex's. Are you serious, Joshua? Emma lifted her head from Alex's chest and turned to look at Joshua. Her tear-stained face was filled with pity, which made people feel distressed. Joshua hesitated for a moment, but finally nodded firmly. I am sure that my abilities can be improved. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 210 Falling Asleep Again? Alex stared at Joshua in surprise. After a long pause, he asked a crucial question: how long will it take? Given Alex's current condition, he was likely dead soon. Joshua's breakthrough in such a short time was clearly impossible. Upon hearing this question, Joshua didn't panic, nor did he hide anything. He answered honestly, I don't know. 3 to 5 years at the shortest, maybe longer. He paused, hesitating for a moment before continuing. 10 to 20 years is possible, maybe even longer. Are you kidding us? Little Luo, who was mingling in the crowd, jumped out at Joshua's words. Standing at 5 feet 4 inches tall, he grabbed Joshua by the collar and easily lifted him up, 2 bony claws emerging from his knuckles. Alex didn't expect Xiaoluoluo to jump out. He glared at Xiaoluoluo, snorted coldly, raised his hand to rescue Joshua, apologized a few words and then asked, do you have any other way? As long as the teacher's body is frozen rapidly and maintained at an extremely low temperature, the flow of energy in the body will be stopped, and this will prevent the spread of energy toxins. Joshua pondered for a while before explaining. After he finished speaking, he turned his head to look at Howard. The U.S. government has made considerable progress in this technology. I believe Mr. Howard should be aware of it. Howard nodded, his face very serious. In theory, this method is feasible, and the experiment has also made considerable breakthroughs. Howard suddenly paused, turned to look at Alex, and said worriedly, but whether it can be successfully thawed and revived, no one knows, because the experiment has not progressed to this stage. After listening to Joshua's freezing method, Alex thought of Steve first. In the movie, Steve was sunk to the bottom of the sea and frozen. He was thawed and revived 70 years later. Isn't he still alive? Alex believed that, having also been injected with a super soldier serum, he was no less capable than Steve, perhaps even more so. Frozen for decades was no problem. The method was sound. Alex's only concern was that being frozen meant another decade of slumber, perhaps even longer. Having already been separated from Emma and Vivian Lee for a decade, Alex didn't want to endure this pain again. It wouldn't be fair to them. Emma saw through Alex's thoughts instantly. Without waiting for Alex to speak, her expression darkened and she said earnestly, this temporary separation is for a long-term companionship. Even if it means waiting for decades, we're willing. Emma reached out and tugged at Monroe. Monroe reacted instantly and nodded without hesitation. Fighting back tears, she gritted her teeth and said firmly, we're willing to wait for you, even for 100 years. As long as we survive, we'll wait forever. Alex looked down at Emma and Monroe, hesitated for a long time, sighed, and said, I'll think about it. Without waiting for anyone to speak, Alex teleported away. On Mount Everest, in Atlan, the Inhumans' hidden city, Alex teleported back here. Alex, why are you back? His Highness Alex was packing something when he suddenly felt someone behind him. He quickly turned around and saw that it was Alex. He couldn't help but smile happily, with a look of surprise on his face. Did you find Medusa? Alex couldn't help feeling embarrassed when he heard what his adoptive father said. He said muddledly, still looking. The Earth is so big, it won't happen that fast. He quickly changed the subject and whispered, I'm here to find you, Father. His Highness Alex was shocked all over, and his slightly old face was full of ecstasy, but it soon disappeared quietly. He didn't want to lose his composure in front of his son. After finally calming himself down, Prince Alex coughed softly before asking, what's wrong? What do you want from me, Father? Would you let a woman wait for you? Alex didn't know who to ask this question. After much deliberation, he finally decided to seek out his adopted father. There's no specific time frame, it could be years, or even decades. There's no guaranteed outcome, and maybe nothing will come of it, just time passing by in vain. Prince Alex initially assumed Alex was seeking justice for his mother, but noticing Alex's expression, he panicked and asked worriedly, "Tell me what happened." Alex looked at his worried father, hesitated for a moment, then began to explain. "Is this really the only solution?" Prince Alex muttered, his mind already searching for a cure for the Inhuman's special abilities. Unfortunately, searching through his memories, Prince Alex was disappointed. The Inhuman's special abilities were even more bizarre and uncontrollable than those of mutants. But abilities like Joshua's were unheard of. Alex, unsure of his father's thoughts, nodded and said, "I'm afraid of death, but I don't want to make them wait in vain. 10 years, I've already owed them a lifetime. You feel it's a debt, but they don't." From Alex's words, His Highness Alex realized that his son had more than one woman, each of whom was utterly devoted to him. His face suddenly lit up with pride. Alex shook his head, his expression even more dejected. "That's why I don't want to owe them anything even more. Since you feel it's a debt, then when you're well, I'll repay them double." Seeing the pain on his son's face, His Highness Alex suddenly understood. This boy was obsessed with waiting while he was asleep, forgetting that there was plenty of time to make up after he was unsealed and revived. Emma had said something similar before. But Alex's mind was a little confused at the time, and he quickly got stuck in his own obsession, completely forgetting it, and remained lost in the painful guilt, unable to escape. Alex was startled for a moment, his pained eyes gradually brightening, as if he had finally grasped something. "Got it," His Highness Alex chuckled, patting Alex's shoulder and soothing him softly. "The future is long, but the present is short. Go back and comfort them." Alex smiled, his warm smile instantly dispelling the fog of sorrow that enveloped him. He seemed to brighten up. "Thank you, Father," Alex said, reaching out to hug his adopted father. After bidding farewell to his father, Alex returned to the floating temple. The vast temple was now filled with many more people. Vivian Leigh and Audrey were there, as were Nick Fury, Carter, and Natasha. Chapter 211, Consciousness Transfer. As soon as Alex appeared, Vivian and Audrey immediately ran over, ignoring the others around them and throwing themselves into his arms. Without a word, they burst into tears. Alex glanced at the others with an embarrassed expression, then reached out and gently patted the two women's shoulders, telepathically offering them comfort. "I'm sorry. I'll make it up to you in the future, forever and ever." Having already made his decision, Alex hesitated, fearing any delay could lead to changes. Upon hearing Alex's telepathic message, Vivian and Audrey froze, then poked their heads out of Alex's arms and looked at him with surprise. They already knew about Alex's condition, and their mission, besides meeting him, was to persuade him to be frozen. But to their surprise, Alex had already agreed before they even opened their mouths. After comforting the two women, Alex turned to Marilyn Monroe, offering a reassuring smile. Then, turning his gaze to Howard, he asked, "What should I prepare for freezing?" Just as Howard was about to speak, Nick Fury stepped forward. His single eye scanned the room, finally landing on Alex. He said expressionlessly, "Alex, I need to speak to you alone." Nick Fury emphasized the word alone, the meaning of which was clear. Alex glanced at Nick Fury in surprise, then nodded. He then teleported Nick Fury and vanished from the floating temple. As the two vanished, everyone in the floating temple turned their attention to Natasha and Carter. They had come with Nick Fury, and now Nick Fury and Alex had left without a word, leaving everyone curious. "Where is this?" Nick Fury looked around in surprise. Snow-capped mountains lay beneath his feet, and the sky was filled with layers of white clouds. The cold, thin air made his breathing rapid and labored. Alex chuckled softly, raised his hand, and created a space of energy. He slowly spread his arms and shouted, "Mount Everest, the roof of the world, the place I've always dreamed of conquering." Nick Fury was slightly startled and turned to look at Alex's smiling face. Within that radiant smile, Nick Fury could sense a tinge of pain and sadness. A sudden thought struck Nick Fury, and he realized that Alex wasn't as open-minded as he'd imagined. "Remember Dr. Zola?" Nick Fury gathered his thoughts, turned his head, and gazed at the white clouds in the distance. A sense of clarity settled in his heart. Alex frowned slightly, turned to Nick Fury, and said impatiently, "What's our relationship? Just say it directly. No need to beat around the bush." Nick Fury's sudden mention of Dr. Zola must have had a deeper meaning, but Alex didn't want to speculate. There was no need. Nick Fury rolled his eyes at that and cursed indignantly, "Still so lazy, How can you call that lazy? Alex seemed to calm down and become more lively in an instant. He complained like a child, and at the end, he didn't forget to show off. I call it using my brain to drive my brawn. It's what smart people do. Nick Fury chuckled and didn't engage in any chit-chat. He put away his smile and said seriously, during World War II, Zola helped Red Skull build a large number of war robots and, of course, cosmic magic, but his real research project is preserving the human spirit and transferring it to another body. What did you say? Alex turned around and looked at Nick Fury with a look of disbelief. Isn't this the soul possession common in the fairy tales of my past life? Could that dwarf scientist have such a skill? Nick Fury ignored Alex's question, merely nodding. He continued, after the end of World War II, the US government launched Project Paperclip, which rehired numerous German scientists. Dr. Zora was one of them. Alex fell silent, his mind reeling from scenes from Captain America, Civil War. He hesitated for a moment before asking, will he help me? Alex had troubled Dr. Zora numerous times during World War II, even having captured him himself. He's a government researcher now. Nick Fury smiled calmly, his face brimming with confidence. Alex, however, shrugged. He's a Hydra agent. Do you think he'll truly be loyal to the government? Alex remembered that in Captain America, Civil War, Dr. Zora had been a Hydra agent from beginning to end. The US government values his intelligence and research, not his affiliation. Nick Fury shuddered, then relaxed, a mixture of helplessness and bitterness. Even if I wanted to touch him, it's impossible. Alex turned to Nick Fury, bewildered. So, what else do you have? SHIELD's capabilities are beyond your imagination, Nick Fury boasted with a mysterious smile. Well, if possible, I never want to fall into deep sleep, forgotten by time. Alex was naturally tempted by the prospect of maintaining consciousness. Now that his concerns were gone, he began to consider other options. But can another body be replaced by energy? Like this, Alex summoned the fire spirit. Transferring consciousness was possible, but transferring it to another body was something Alex couldn't accept. Call it male chauvinism or a case of misophobia, but the thought of using another body to interact with Emma and the others made Alex want to go berserk. Nick Fury stared in amazement at the fire spirit beside Alex. With its appearance, the temperature around them instantly rose dramatically, even the surrounding snow began to melt rapidly. After a long pause, Nick Fury came to his senses at Alex's call. He looked the fire spirit up and down for a moment, then said uncertainly, I've seen Zora's research report. It should be possible. Fearing Alex might not believe him, he emphasized, he even plans to transfer consciousness into a machine. If he can do it with a machine, then this energy body can certainly do it. Transferring consciousness into a machine? Alex's mind raced, recalling scenes from the movie, knowing that Zora's plan would ultimately succeed. Thinking of this, Alex felt the chances of transferring consciousness into an energy body would be even higher. The thought filled Alex with excitement. With the ability to control energy, if his body could also become an energy body, Alex felt his future was bright. Of course, Alex wasn't ready to give up his current physical body. The ability of teleportation and energy control can be transferred along with the consciousness and will not disappear, but replication is an ability granted by the mutant X gene, which is engraved on the body. After the consciousness is transferred, Alex will lose the ability to replicate. Chapter 212 Goodbye Zora. Get ready here, I'll help you arrange things. Nick Fury turned to look at the cheerful Alex, chuckling softly. Don't go into the details, it'll be troublesome if it gets out. Alex nodded nonchalantly, saying casually, don't worry, I know this common sense. The two lingered a moment longer on the roof of the world before heading home. Seeing the two appear, Emma and the others rushed over, surrounding Alex. They wanted to speak, but didn't know what to ask, so they could only look at Alex with hopeful eyes. During the time Alex and Nick Fury were away, the floating temple was not peaceful. Although Natasha and Carter said nothing, everyone speculated that Nick Fury must have a way to save Alex. Otherwise, he wouldn't have specifically called Alex out to discuss matters at this critical moment. Alex patted the four girls on the shoulder, his gentle gaze sweeping across them. A cheerful smile spread across his face, filled with joy. Thanks to Nick Fury, I might not have to sleep anymore. Alex wasn't sure about the specific outcome, so he used the uncertain word maybe. Emma and the other girls paused, tears streaming uncontrollably, their excitement evident. While the others didn't shed tears, they all seemed deeply moved, their eyes looking at Nick Fury filled with gratitude. It took a long time for Alex to calm the four girls' tears, and then he began to explain briefly. He didn't elaborate much, simply stating that he would continue to live in an energy form, while his body would still need to be frozen. Alex's explanation sparked curiosity among many, but seeing that Alex wasn't willing to elaborate further, and even Emma hadn't asked any questions, they had no reason to suppress their confusion. Nick Fury was incredibly efficient. After just half a day, Alex received the call and arrived in New York with Emma and the other two girls. Alex hadn't originally wanted to bring the girls, but they insisted, and Alex couldn't refuse, so he agreed. Shortly after the five of them returned to New York, Nick Fury personally drove to X-Force to pick them up, a truly dedicated act. Is it far? After ushering the four girls into the car, Alex took the passenger seat and turned to look at the serious Nick Fury, somewhat surprised. Why are you here? Just send anyone else. No, I have to take you there. No one else. Nick Fury shook his head, glancing around cautiously, as if wary of something. Alex paused, then shrugged and said jokingly, then I'll have to trouble the director of SHIELD to be your driver. Nick Fury spat softly, glaring at Alex with a hint of irritation. Alex, undeterred, locked eyes with Nick Fury. Ultimately, Nick Fury was defeated, looking at Alex with a look of dejection. I have to say, Alex, you're quite shameless. Chatting and laughing, the car unknowingly drove out of New York City, winding its way to an unknown destination. Just as he was wondering, Nick Fury suddenly drove close to a military camp. A dozen American soldiers, armed with submachine guns, stood proudly at the gates. As the car approached, four soldiers surrounded it, their faces stern. But upon seeing Nick Fury in the driver's seat, they immediately changed their demeanor to respectful, not even glancing at Alex and the others in the car, and let them pass. So this is the so-called face recognition. As the car entered the camp, Alex turned to look at Nick Fury in amazement, jokingly saying, I never expected that. I really didn't expect that. Nick Fury glared at Alex in frustration, then turned his head away, ignoring him, his heart sulking. Seeing Nick Fury's humiliation, Emma and the other girls, who had been sitting quietly in the back seat, couldn't help but chuckle. Emma laughed a few times, patted Alex on the head, and turned to apologize to Nick Fury. Nick, I'm sorry, there's nothing to be sorry about. I'm used to it. Before Emma could finish, Nick Fury waved his hand, looked at Alex with a look of grievance, and chuckled. It was better before, but now it's even worse. Alex curled his lips, a truly smirk on his face. After circling the military camp for a while, the car finally stopped in front of a relatively isolated one-story building. No other buildings were visible for dozens of meters. Is this it? Alex opened the car door, welcoming Emma and the other girls out. Then he turned to look at the small, 3-meter-tall building in front of him. Disappointment filled his face, but then he smiled again and turned to Nick Fury in surprise. Is it underground again? Alex had encountered many hidden laboratories and bases, either located underground or carved into the mountains. Nick Fury said nothing as he led Alex and the other women past the guards at the entrance and headed straight inside. After passing through a long corridor flanked by guards who occasionally appeared on either side, they pushed open the door at the end of the corridor and an elevator appeared. The elevator traveled downward for almost a minute before stopping. As soon as he stepped out, Alex couldn't help but exclaim, this must be at least 100 meters deep. Right, judging by the elevator's speed and duration of descent, the underground laboratory must have been at least 100 meters deep. Nick Fury nodded, his expression of indifference gradually fading, replaced by a solemnity and a hint of greed. As soon as they stepped out of the elevator, someone came to greet them and led them through the bustling laboratory area, eventually leading them into a separate laboratory. Standing in the laboratory was a short man. Alex recognized him from behind as Dr. Zola. Nearly 20 years had passed, and Zola had barely changed, from his short stature to his nearly bald head. No mistakes. It took Zora 5 or 6 minutes to finish his work before the young man leading the way whispered, Dr. Zora, your guest has arrived. While waiting, Alex didn't cause any disturbance, but simply glanced around, occasionally darting his gaze towards Zora. Hearing the voice, Zora instinctively turned his head and saw Nick Fury opening his mouth to say something. Suddenly, he noticed Alex beside him, and his whole body trembled, his narrow eyes filled with fear. You didn't tell him it was me. Seeing Zora's reaction, Alex frowned, glanced at Nick Fury covertly, and asked in a low voice. Nick Fury also frowned, then seemed to think of something and said calmly, I told you, maybe I'm a little excited to see you again. I hope it's just excitement, not palpitations. Alex shrugged, chuckled, and said self-deprecatingly, lest he accidentally cause an accident? That would be troublesome. Don't worry, he doesn't have the guts. Nick Fury laughed coldly, his face wearing a sinister smile that was very scary. Dear book friends, don't forget to recommend it after reading it. Scorpio needs your support. Chapter 213 Preparing for Transfer. Sure enough, upon seeing the smile on Nick Fury's face, Zora, who was slowly approaching, shuddered. After a pause, she continued approaching, a faint look of fear still on her round face. I won't introduce you, you know him. Nick Fury pointed at Alex and said casually to Zora. Now, let me ask you, can you do it? Beforehand, Nick Fury had briefly discussed Alex with Zora, emphasizing the issue of the energy body. However, Zora hadn't given a definitive answer, saying she needed to think about it. Seeing Nick Fury's directness, Zora didn't hesitate. She looked Alex up and down and said solemnly, with Alex's level of consciousness, he can transform at any time. No further preparation is needed. He paused, raised his hand to adjust the frame of his glasses, and hesitantly said, as for the energy body, I need to see it to confirm whether it's feasible. Alex secretly used telepathy on Zora, but found nothing unusual. He nodded and summoned the fire spirit. Ever since condensing the fire spirit with the Black Queen's help, Alex has kept it with him. Although it requires constant control, Alex doesn't find it tiresome, simply considering it a training exercise in energy control. Indeed, after a few days of practice, Alex discovered that his energy control had indeed become much more proficient. After the fire spirit appeared, Zora ignored Alex and approached it eagerly, eager to penetrate its body. Fortunately, Alex had been prepared, covering the fire spirit with an energy barrier to block out the flames. Otherwise, with Zora's body, the fire spirit would have roasted her to pulp the moment she approached. As the observation continued, the expression on Zora's face gradually became solemn. After a while, Zora looked up at Alex and shook his head. He said seriously, the energy body does not have the ability to accept consciousness, so it is not feasible to transfer consciousness to it. Alex was a little disappointed when he heard this. After a long silence, he suddenly remembered what Nick Fury had said before, and couldn't help but say, can I transfer my consciousness to the machine? Alex absolutely could not accept transferring it to another body, so he could only settle for the second best and choose the computer. At least it would be better. Zora didn't answer Alex's question. Instead, he asked, excuse me, is this energy body controlled by your mind? Alex's words made him wary. He looked Zora up and down for a moment, confirming he had no other thoughts. Then he nodded, yes, it's under my control. That's good. Zora suddenly laughed at Alex's answer. His round face curled up, his eyes narrowed into slits, and he said excitedly, I've invented a container that can store consciousness, called a consciousness register. We can first transfer your consciousness into the consciousness register, and then embed the consciousness register into the energy body. Alex clapped his hands and laughed excitedly, saying, although it involves a process, it's acceptable. Transferring consciousness to a computer was a last resort, and Alex didn't want to choose this path unless it was absolutely necessary. Zora's proposed method, although it sounded a bit complicated, seemed more suitable to Alex. Hearing Alex's unwavering agreement, Zora hesitated. After a long pause, she spoke, the consciousness register is still only theoretical, and hasn't been experimentally verified. You're kidding me. Zora was halfway through her words when Nick Fury's face turned pale. He reached out and grabbed Zora by the collar, lifting him up, his single eye flashing a fierce, cold light. Zora stood obediently, not struggling, and quickly explained, it's only theoretical, but I can guarantee it's absolutely safe, as if to bolster his credibility. After a long pause, Zora added, if you don't come to me, I'll be transferring my consciousness to the consciousness register soon. Nick Fury didn't say anything, but his expression gradually relaxed, though a hint of doubt remained. Emma and the other girls exchanged glances. They had all heard Alex talk about Zora, and they didn't trust him at all, so they too were hesitant. Alex said nonchalantly, no big deal, let's give it a try. Seeing everyone's expressions remain serious, Alex added with a smile, if it doesn't work, we can just transfer it to the computer. It's no big deal. Nick Fury, still concerned, let Zora go. Can we test the consciousness register first to see if it works? Nick Fury didn't want to use Alex's life as a guinea pig for Zora. When it came to Alex, Nick Fury had to be extremely cautious. Separating the consciousness from the body is a piece of cake, but it requires a lot of preparation. It'll take at least a month or two, and possibly even longer if it fails. Zora shook her head, somewhat helplessly. Not everyone has the telepathic power of Alex, who can transfer it at will. Emma, without a trace of concealment, directly activated her telepathy on Zora, digging deep into her memories, but ultimately found nothing. However, Emma wasn't going to trust Zora. Because of the mysterious power of telepathy, many people were wary, and various methods of preventing it had emerged. Zora, if you dare have any evil intentions, millions of mutants will not let you go. Giving up telepathy, Emma slowly approached Zora. Her face was as cold as ice, and her deep voice, like the voice of hell, was eerie and terrifying. Zora's face was covered in sweat. He wiped the beads of sweat from his forehead and said tremblingly, "I dare not, absolutely not." With these threats, everything was decided. The experiment was immediately prepared, and Alex and the others finally saw the truly miraculous consciousness register. Seeing Zora solemnly holding out what looked like an urn, Alex and the others' faces darkened. This thing was a consciousness register? How ridiculous. Are you sure this thing can store consciousness? Seeing the so-called consciousness register, Alex's previously confident eyes turned skeptical. He looked at Zora with a strange look, tinged with a hint of wariness. Zora noticed Alex's look and nodded quickly, saying with certainty, "Yes, it can. You'd better pray that it works." Nick Fury took a few steps closer and threatened again, even pulling out a gun. "Otherwise, my gun has no eyes." Chapter 214 Transfer begins. Under Nick Fury's threat, Zora trembled with fear, afraid to move, nearly raising his hands in surrender. Alex reached out and patted Nick Fury's hand on the pistol, sparing Zora the embarrassment. Then, turning to gaze at Zora, he casually said, "Red Skull and Hydra, I can destroy them with a single blow. Dr. Zora, please do not choose the wrong side." With his own safety at stake, Alex had to be cautious, even using warnings and threats as necessary. Zora, who had been largely indifferent to Alex's words, seemed agitated. He raised his hands and began to defend himself earnestly. "Since I've joined the US government, I have nothing to do with Hydra or Red Skull anymore." Alex shrugged non-committally, remaining silent. He gave Zora a meaningful look before turning and walking towards the lab bed. Taking the opportunity to raise her glasses, Zora glanced deeply at Alex's back. A glint flashed in her eyes, fleeting as she began busily working at the lab bed with a hint of excitement. No one noticed Zora's change. Because Alex's mind was so powerful, no elaborate preliminary preparations were needed, the transfer could be performed at any time. Therefore, the experiment went straight to the final stage, transferring Alex's consciousness to the consciousness register. This was the only stage. As for the subsequent energy body, that would be Alex's responsibility, not Zora's. Zora walked over to Alex, who lay on the lab bed. After carefully examining the equipment, she placed a hood connected to a complex network of wires on Alex's head. The tangled wires connected several machines and ultimately led to a black iron box that resembled an urn. After firmly securing the hood to Alex's head, Zora turned and walked towards the control panel, seemingly preparing to start the experiment. At this moment, Emma couldn't help but speak, surveying the connected machines and consciousness registers, a look of hesitation on her face. "What about backup measures?" Emma turned to look at Zora, her eyes fierce and her face slightly livid. "What about other precautions?" While Emma wasn't a researcher, she was in charge of Academy X and had some familiarity with its laboratories and experimental research. Zora's lab equipment looked rather old, as if left over from World War II, so antiquated it felt unsafe. Furthermore, during the previous discussion, a backup plan had been prepared to prevent the consciousness register from failing. This plan involved transferring Alex's consciousness to a computer if the register couldn't store it. However, the experimental wiring clearly lacked the computer mentioned in this backup plan. Zora was about to apologize when Alex, lying on the lab bed, interrupted her with a confident, "No need, I think it can work." In fact, Alex had already tried it himself just now, successfully transferring his consciousness into the consciousness register without even Zora starting the machine. And now, when Alex's body spoke, it was actually Alex telepathically controlling it. Emma and the others, unaware of Alex's successful experiment, disapproved. Alex, unwilling to share this secret, remained wary of Zora. Finally, after Alex lay on the lab bed for a long time, Zora finally set up her backup plan. A computer connected to the hood over Alex's head via a special connection, further complicating the already complex wiring. Zora, if my consciousness is transferred to the computer, can I control it? After successfully testing the power of the consciousness register, Alex began to focus on the computer again. If he could control it, wouldn't he be the legendary intelligence program? The future internet would be incredibly advanced. Possessing such power would be a real boon. Zora wiped the sweat from her forehead, turned to Alex, and nodded, saying, "Of course, it's just like using a computer yourself." "No difference? Maybe even faster." Alex nodded silently, seemingly waiting for the experiment to begin, but secretly, he was already transmitting his consciousness remotely to the computer via radio waves through the consciousness register. However, this type of transmission took a toll on Alex, and gaining access to the computer proved difficult. After considerable effort, Alex's consciousness finally entered the computer. It was a truly magical experience. The only description Alex could think of was the Matrix, even more impressive than Leo's. Alex felt he could control every program in the computer. However, it was only control, not the level of legendary super-intelligent programs, which left Alex somewhat disappointed. As his thoughts wandered, Alex heard Zora's voice. Her voice, despite her effort at calmness, rose and fell, her excitement rising and falling. "Alex, get ready. This might hurt, but bear with me." Alex chuckled, thinking to himself, if you knew I'd already transferred, you'd be shocked. Despite his pride, Alex had to pretend to be nervous. As he pondered this, Alex transferred his consciousness back to his body, wanting to test the effectiveness of Zora's device. "Begin." With Zora's command, the transfer officially began. A slight stinging pain shot through Alex's forehead, like a needle prick. It was fine at first, but gradually the stinging intensified, not painful, but numerous. Initially, it was just 1 or 2 spots on his forehead, but as time went on, it felt as if his entire head was covered in needles. While not painful, the dense, tingling sensation gave Alex goosebumps. Seeing Alex's face in agony, Emma and the other 2 girls immediately gathered around him, their pretty faces filled with worry. They couldn't help but reach out to smooth the unconscious frown on Alex's brow. "No," Emma was about to move, but Zora stopped her. Under Emma's icy gaze, she quickly explained, "Don't touch him during the transfer to avoid unnecessary trouble." Zora's explanation, though somewhat unclear, obediently withdrew her right hand, her expression growing increasingly worried. On the experimental bed, after the intensive pain, Alex gradually adapted to it. He felt that the itchiness was more than the pain, and he felt numb and tingling, and an inexplicable pleasure came over him. Chapter 215 Transfer completed. Just as Alex was enjoying the tingling pleasure, he suddenly realized his consciousness had left his body, traveling along wires through machines, towards the final consciousness register. "It really works." Alex was astonished, and deeply impressed by Zora's mind transfer technique. Zora wasn't a mutant, nor did she possess telepathy, but the fact that such an ordinary human could possess such an ability was simply incredible. As he marveled in admiration, Alex's consciousness passed through Zora's equipment and finally entered the consciousness register. However, Alex didn't notice that a tiny fragment of his complete consciousness was missing, secretly trapped in a machine in front of the consciousness register. It was so tiny that it would be unnoticeable if one didn't carefully feel for it. Once Alex's consciousness had transferred into the consciousness register, Zora immediately shut down all the machines and then hurriedly disconnected all connections. Emma and the others watched Zora's actions with great anxiety, as they had no idea whether the transfer had been successful. Instead, Zora's sudden movement made them nervous, fearing it might be a sign of a failed transfer. Fortunately, after removing the hood from Alex's head, Zora breathed a sigh of relief, unable to conceal his excitement. Success! Upon hearing this, Emma impatiently activated her telepathy, slowly reaching for the now independent consciousness register. Her expression shifted between worry and curiosity. A register capable of storing consciousness would surely intrigue everyone. Before Emma's telepathic power could reach the register, Alex's telepathic voice echoed in everyone's minds, filled with deep joy. Success! We'll see each other again soon. As soon as the words uttered, the flame spirit emerged from the void once again. Under Alex's control, the flame spirit appeared next to the consciousness register, picked up the register, and inserted it directly into his head. Of course, the register was protected by an energy shield that blocked the flames, otherwise, the flame spirit's size would have incinerated it to ash. Emma and the others stood by, their faces filled with wonder and a hint of worry. Emma had other thoughts in her mind and was ready to go back to the floating temple to talk to Alex. After placing the consciousness register, Alex suddenly felt very bad. Through the consciousness register, Alex felt like a master controlling a puppet. Although he was just as comfortable as if he were in the real world, he lacked the immersive feeling. He always felt a little nauseous and uncomfortable. It was not as refreshing as the transfer to the computer just now. However, Alex only complained in his heart. Now that things had come to this, he could only accept it. In order to reduce his resistance, Alex transformed the flame elf again. Its body and appearance completely became Alex's. He even put a layer of clothes on the flame elf, which was of course made of energy. It's quite the look. The four Emma girls exchanged a laugh at the drastically transformed flame spirit. The bolder Monroe and Audrey approached, curiously reaching out to touch Alex's new body, muttering, "It feels so strange." Seeing the disappointed expressions on Audrey and Monroe's faces, Alex felt a bit amused and embarrassed as he explained, "It'll be fine once you get used to it." After bidding farewell to Zora, Alex and the others returned to New York in the car driven by Nick Fury. Alex didn't immediately take the four girls back to the floating temple, wanting to use this time to make amends and spend some time with them. Since they met and fell in love, Alex had barely gone on dates with the girls, let alone the shopping trips women so loved. When Alex shared his plan with the girls, even the usually composed Emma was overcome with excitement. She forgot she was in the car and stood up, hugging Alex's head in the front seat, her face flushed, oblivious to the bumps. Back at X Film, the four girls rushed into the building. Alex, surprised, called out, "What's wrong? Aren't you going shopping?" The four girls rolled their eyes, and Emma, in a rare display of coquettishness, said, "We need to change clothes first, right?" Without waiting for Alex to speak, the four girls rushed into the building and vanished in a flash. Poor Alex, in his previous life, had been a homebody and a virgin, never in a relationship and with very little contact with women. In this life, he had more contact with the women, including four, but his understanding of them was practically zero. Watching the four women disappear, Alex turned to Nick Fury in surprise, his face bewildered. "Why change clothes? I think this outfit looks great, good luck." Nick Fury gave Alex a look that said, "Focus on yourself." He ignored him and left without a word. It turns out that shopping with women is a truly painful experience, and the first pain is the waiting. Alex waited in front of the X-Force building for over half an hour. Just when Alex was about to lose his temper, Emma and the other two finally appeared. The four women, glamorously dressed, looked like fairies from legends, each with a distinct temperament, sexy, elegant, intellectual, and alluring. In short, they were absolutely stunning, so stunning that Alex was completely captivated, and the half-hour wait was worth it. As soon as the four women left the X-Force building, they immediately saw Alex, a man with a pig-like appearance. They all smiled wildly, their hearts filled with pride. Women dressed to please themselves, and Alex's reaction naturally delighted the four women. The moment their laughter broke out, Alex snapped back to his senses, but he wasn't embarrassed. It was his women's business. Seeing their genuine smiles, Alex felt even more guilty. He shouted, "Let's go. I'm yours for the rest of the day." He stretched out his arms, extending them a full half-meter to embrace them all. With a shake of his head, he said seriously, "From now on, I'm your servant and guard. I'll do whatever you want." No regrets. The four women were shocked and turned to look at Alex. Knowing he was trying to make amends, they didn't pretend. They laughed and cheered, dragging Alex along with them, seemingly impatient to run. After spending a day in New York with the four girls, Alex returned to the floating temple with Emma and Monroe. Vivian Lee also returned to X Film to continue her role as the domineering female president, while Audrey returned to Hollywood to continue filming. Everything seemed to be back on track. Chapter 216 Bucky delivers the letter. Upon returning to the floating temple, Alex immediately went to Academy X, preparing to intensively train his current body and abilities. Without his crucial cloning ability, Alex's true offensive prowess was gone. His only remaining skill was energy control, which he now needed to master. Before beginning his training, however, Alex first took a look at his frozen body. That same day, after completing the transfer of consciousness, Alex immediately brought his body back to the floating temple and handed it over to Howard for freezing. How long can it last? Alex felt a strange, inexplicable emotion as he gazed through the frosted glass at the slightly bluish ice. Howard, standing beside Alex, was slightly startled by his question, then chuckled and said, "Don't worry, as long as this floating island doesn't sink, it will remain frozen forever." Alex chuckled, fell silent, and, after a deep look at his frozen body, turned and left. Finding a training room, locking the door, Alex prepared for his intensive training. Before he began, however, Alex needed to find a training direction to quickly become combat ready. Alex believed that energy control could be broadly divided into two areas of advancement: fine control, requiring meticulous control energy, in other words, making it do whatever he desired. The other was intensity control. The more energy one could control, the greater its power. A fist-sized energy ball naturally couldn't compare to one the size of a head. Of course, the best way to improve energy control was to simultaneously improve both. However, Alex didn't have time right now. AIM and the Hellfire Club were eyeing him closely, and Alex needed to quickly improve his combat effectiveness to compensate for his lack of replication abilities. Logically, Alex should have chosen the second option, but after careful consideration, he chose the first. Ultimately, it came down to a matter of time. Expecting a significant increase in energy control intensity in a short period of time was unrealistic. It was a slow, tedious process, like an empty reservoir with only one inlet. Filling the reservoir required time, and no matter how fast a single inlet filled it, it wouldn't be much faster. Fine control, however, was different. While this, too, was a skill that came with practice, Alex's powerful psychic powers made rapid improvement in this area relatively easy. Having determined his path to improvement, Alex began relentless training. Alex, now a body of energy, felt no fatigue at all. As long as his psychic powers held up, he could continue training. However, after only 2 days, Emma summoned Alex because of Strucker's actions. "How is it going, Alex?" Emma asked worriedly, watching Alex emerge in high spirits. Originally, Emma hadn't wanted to disturb Alex, but now, with Bucky the Winter Soldier arriving in person, Emma had no choice but to summon him. Though only 2 days had passed, Alex's progress was immense, evident even from his appearance. Alex's body was now that of a fire spirit, its fiery crimson form akin to a blazing flame. Its intense heat, without Alex's control, could incinerate everything nearby. But looking at Alex now, his appearance no longer betrayed his fiery form. He looked more like a strangely human being, much like the Red Devil. "It's better than ever," Alex said, reaching out to pull Emma into his arms, leaning over to kiss her forehead with a playful smile. After this incident, Alex had changed significantly. Intimate gestures, which he had rarely done before, were now effortless and adept. Emma blushed slightly, but she didn't resist. On the contrary, she felt even more delighted. Activating a teleportation, he brought Emma back to the floating temple. Before Alex could even greet the others, his eyes fixed on the figure standing proudly in the center of the temple. It was none other than Bucky Barnes. "Bucky!" Alex excitedly left Emma behind at the side of Bucky's familiar figure and ran over. He didn't approach, but stood a few steps behind him, his face a mixture of laughter and tears. Bucky, the Winter Soldier, heard the noise and turned. His face was strangely pale and cold, as if covered in frost. He looked Alex up and down with a cold, indifferent look. He casually tossed out a letter and said in a deep voice, "Letter delivered. Farewell." As soon as he finished speaking, Bucky turned and began to leave, his steps decisive and without a moment's hesitation. Alex, of course, would not let Bucky go. He reached out to take the letter, then stepped in front of Bucky and said earnestly, "Excuse me, Bucky, I have to keep you. I'm carrying a bomb. If I don't leave this place in 10 seconds, it will explode." Bucky looked at Alex expressionlessly, his tone calm and unwavering, as if the explosion had nothing to do with him. Alex's eyes narrowed slightly, his fiery red eyes shimmering with murderous intent. However, he was helpless and could only slowly step aside, allowing Bucky to exit the temple. Seeing Alex's attitude, the other X-Men blocking the way did not dare to make any move and could only let him pass. Who knows if what he said is true? A low, unspoken murmur echoed from the crowd. It was quiet, but it was unusually loud in the quiet temple. Alex suddenly turned, glaring at the speaker with a fierce look on his face, and spat out a single word, "Get out." The speaker froze in shock. Looking up at Alex's expression, he couldn't help but shrink back, not daring to utter a single complaint. He carefully slipped out of the crowd and disappeared. Alex turned his gaze back to Bucky, who was almost out of the floating temple. After a long silence, he suddenly shouted, Bucky, do you really not remember me as your brother? Alex wasn't sure if Bucky's previous threat was true, but whether it was true or not, Alex didn't dare to gamble. Hearing Alex's cry, Howard's eyes in the temple couldn't help but turn red. He had followed Alex all the way here and knew the bond between the three brothers well. Now, one is missing, one has lost his memory and is being exploited, and the only lucid one almost died not long ago. The three brothers have truly faced a difficult fate. Howard is in this situation, not to mention Monroe. Among all the people present, she is the only one who is close to both Alex and Bucky, and she is closer than Howard. Monroe is Alex's sister, and also Bucky's sister. What's more, this is the first time Monroe has seen Bucky again after learning of his sacrifice. How could she hold back her tears? Her face was immediately covered with tear marks, and she looked pitiful. Unfortunately, despite the pity of the crowd in the temple, Bucky, the Winter Soldier, did not stop when he reached the door. He walked out without hesitation and disappeared into a building in the blink of an eye. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 217 Challenge. Seeing Bucky completely vanish, Alex sighed deeply and turned his gaze to the envelope in his hand. The dark red envelope was strikingly different, as if soaked in blood, carrying a subtle, menacing aura. Emma glanced at Alex's expression, wanting to offer some words of advice, but she breathed a sigh of relief when she saw that Alex had quickly recovered. Alex chuckled softly at Emma, then tore open the envelope and pulled out a piece of equally blood-red paper. It contained only a few words, a challenge. What? A number of people stood behind Alex, and those with sharp eyes could see it. They couldn't help but shout, cursing profusely, their faces filled with indignation. No one else knew what the letter contained, and watching the cursing only in confusion, some impatiently opened their mouths to ask, but after a long while, no one answered. In desperation, everyone turned to Alex, awaiting his response. Nothing, just them wanting a duel with us. Alex casually handed the letter to Emma, muttering to himself. With the might of Strucker and the Hellfire Club, plus the Brotherhood of Mutants, their combined strength was undoubtedly stronger than the House of Mutants. There was no need for a one-on-one duel at this moment. Emma glanced at the letter, her expression grim. She glanced up at Alex, realizing that Alex shared her thoughts. They both saw Strucker's challenge as questionable. Isn't this a trap? Instead of exchanging words publicly, Alex and Emma opted for a telepathic exchange, involving Tessa, a rare thinker within the House of Mutants. Alex shook his head imperceptibly at Emma's words, pondering for a moment before saying, "It's not a trap. They're not foolish enough to set us up like this." After a brief pause, Alex added, "Besides, the location of this duel is technically our territory. Even if they wanted to set a trap, they couldn't." Tessa didn't say anything, but her slightly furrowed brow revealed her computer-like mind working furiously. "So what do we do? Go or not?" Emma glanced at Tessa, then turned to Alex, her brow furrowed in a tense expression. "Go, of course we should go. Why not?" No matter what scheme Strucker and the Black Queen had hatched, Alex wouldn't back down. "If they want to fight, we'll go with them." Before Alex could finish, Tessa's stiff, robotic voice suddenly chimed in, its coldness intimidating. "According to my calculations, their most likely plan is to lure the tiger away from the mountain." Tessa's cold gaze swept over Alex and Emma, a hint of worry flickering across his expressionless face. "While we were turning our attention to the duel, they secretly sent people to attack the floating temple." Alex was slightly startled, looking at Tessa in disbelief. "A duel only requires a small force. How can they lure the tiger away from the mountain?" Alex was no fool. He wouldn't be so foolish as to send out all the elite for a small duel. Besides, the guards on the floating island were formidable, many even more formidable than the X-Men. "All they need to do is divert the tiger away," Tessa sneered, a hint of sarcasm, not directed at Alex, of course, but at Strucker and his group. Alex and Emma looked at each other, bewildered. "It won't be easy for them to lure our great tiger away." Alex possessed teleportation, making him much faster than Strucker and the others. If he realized his opponent wasn't right, Alex could easily return in an instant, effectively luring the tiger away from the mountain without a fight. The only possibility is that they have too many experts. Tessa's face darkened, her gaze piercing the direction where Bucky had disappeared, a look of deep gravity. Tessa remembered Alex's mention of the genetic enhancement fluid. Perhaps the Brotherhood's mutants would become a formidable force, perhaps some among them had reached unimaginable heights of strength. Alex and Emma evidently thought of this, their brows furrowed slightly. After a moment's deliberation, Alex came up with a plan: have someone impersonate me and go to the competition. I'll command the floating temple. Even without the clone, Alex remained one of the most skilled experts in the mutant house. He was bound to be a key figure in the competition, and he was destined to be the most watched. Everything was quickly ordered according to Alex's arrangements. Most of the X-Men continued to stay at their posts as if nothing had happened, but many experts were secretly recalled and hidden in the floating island. The person pretending to be Alex was also found. He was a mutant proficient in shape-shifting. His abilities were similar to Mystique, but weaker. He could only transform into the appearance of others and could not simulate superpowers. Fortunately, this transgender person also had a certain degree of telepathy, which was a compensation. It was already the early morning of the next day when everything was ready. Without too much delay, Alex personally sent the group of people who were preparing to participate in the duel to their destination, a city on the plains, right in the middle of the influence of AIM and Mutant Home, and closer to Mutant Home. Nothing unusual. An X-Man, skilled in reconnaissance, scanned the area, confirming there was no danger, not even a single person. There's no one within a few thousand meters. Alex nodded, glanced at Emma, and cautiously instructed, I'll keep an eye on this area. If there's any trouble, I'll rush over immediately. The floating temple's holographic control console could observe the area, allowing Alex to see everything happening in real time. Emma gently hugged Alex and repeated her words, you should be careful too. After a slight pause, Emma's voice rose slightly, tinged with a hint of concern. After all, times are different now. Don't be too stubborn. Alex looked at Emma with a mixture of laughter and tears. After a goodbye kiss, he teleported back to the floating temple. Unrelated sentence fragment, no mistake, one song, one release, one content, 1/6, one book, one forum, one look. Crystal sat beside the floating temple's control console, her expression solemn. To prepare for the impending battle, Alex summoned Crystal. Crystal's ability to manipulate the four elements was exceptional among the mutants, making her a significant asset. Ready? Crystal asked, sensing Alex's arrival, a hint of amusement on her face. Alex watched helplessly as his body gradually transformed, glaring at Crystal in exasperation. Don't be ridiculous. Alex's body was a body of fire, and Crystal's ability to activate and manipulate the four elements included fire. Alex was even more frustrated by the fact that, at this stage, his energy control couldn't match Crystal's. In other words, Crystal could manipulate Alex's body at will, commanding him to do whatever he wanted, and Alex was powerless to resist. Chapter 218 The Unexpected Person. After playing around with Crystal for a while, Alex turned his gaze to the holographic console, which displayed the location of Emma and the others. The wide-open field provided a clear view. Alex, do you think this is really a trap? Crystal sat beside Alex, bored, glancing at the holographic console before turning back to Alex, trying to find something to say. Alex, without even turning back, stared intently at the holographic console, his expression grave. Strucker and the Black Queen are not easy to deal with. There's definitely something fishy about this challenge. As for whether it's the trap we anticipated, we don't know. Crystal glared at Alex's back in annoyance. She took a few steps closer, peered over Alex's shoulder at the holographic console, and pointed at the people around Emma, asking curiously, what abilities do these people have? Ever since acquiring his energy body, Alex had spent all his free time with Emma and her 4 daughters, becoming incredibly close to them. This greatly displeased Crystal, but she felt helpless and could only sulk. Crystal finally had a chance to be alone with Alex, and she didn't want to waste it in a boring wait. Alex felt a warm breath beside his ear. Although he didn't have a heart, he had the illusion that his heart was beating faster and his face was hot. After calming himself down, Alex quietly moved away and pointed at the people in the hologram and introduced them. They were all veterans of the X-Men, with rich abilities and combat experience. Crystal had no intention of listening to Alex's introduction. After noticing Alex's quietly moving body, her face flushed instantly, and then she felt a wave of grievance in her heart. Her eyes also turned red, and she almost cried. Just when Crystal was about to collapse, Alex suddenly screamed, pointed at the hologram, and her face was full of disbelief. Crystal's tears stopped immediately, and she wiped her eyes. She leaned over, her eyes wide with surprise. "Why is he here?" 7 or 8 people suddenly appeared in the holographic image, led by none other than Dark Phoenix and Strucker. But what caught Alex and Crystal's eye was the person standing next to Strucker, a yellow man in a bright green robe, his hands clasped over his abdomen, gleaming with 10 rings. It was none other than Mandarin. Alex's mind raced, but he couldn't figure out how Mandarin could be involved with these people. He couldn't help but wonder, is this a plot from a future movie? On the fighting ground, Emma was also surprised when she saw Mandarin. Although she had never met him before, Alex had introduced him to her before. Her eyes turned to the 10 rings on Mandarin's hands, a serious expression on her face. "No, I need to go over there." Without waiting for Crystal to speak, Alex teleported to Emma's side. Before revealing himself, Alex deliberately altered his appearance, hoping to trick the other party. Unfortunately, Alex's appearance immediately caught Mandarin's attention. Mandarin had been puzzled by the appearance of the shapeshifter Alex, feeling he was different from the previous Alex. Alex's true form revealed the truth. After figuring it out, Mandarin snorted, looking at Alex with disdain. "So, this is your guts, Alex." At Mandarin's prompting, the Black Queen and the others turned to look at Alex standing next to Emma, a flicker of surprise crossing their faces. "I don't know what happened, but this is the real Alex," Mandarin casually explained, glancing at the people around him, his eyes fixed on Alex's true form with a terrifying glint. Seeing his identity exposed, Alex couldn't continue his disguise. He signaled the shapeshifters to return to their true forms, and Alex himself molded his energy body into his original form. The Black Queen studied Alex for a long moment, her eyes narrowing slightly. Seeing Alex's completely different body, the Black Queen instantly understood, Alex would rather die than cooperate with the Hellfire Club. This thought filled the Black Queen with a sense of melancholy, and upon seeing Alex's new form, she felt even more annoyed. While the Black Queen was secretly brooding, Strucker noticed Alex's uniqueness. As a former Hydra leader, Strucker had naturally heard of Dr. Zola's mind transfer, and it was clear that Alex had transferred his mind into this new body. However, unlike the others, Strucker was more concerned about whether this new body had any special powers. For a moment, the atmosphere in the room became tense due to Alex's sudden appearance. In the floating temple, Crystal also looked at the hologram nervously, her beautiful face filled with worry. She knew the Mandarin's strength, and now that Alex had lost his powerful cloning abilities, defeating him would be extremely difficult. Just as everyone was silent, Mandarin suddenly laughed, turned to look at Strucker and the others, and said slowly, "Well, now they can't escape." Alex's body trembled at the words, and a sudden recollection dawned on her. She turned to look at Mandarin, her eyes blazing with anger. In the previous battle with Mandarin, Alex's teleportation had revealed a significant flaw. It was completely inoperable under the powerful electromagnetic interference. Alex had been worried about Emma and the others, and hadn't considered this until Mandarin's words. But it was too late. Alex had just experimented, and the teleportation was no longer possible. What do we do now? Emma realized the situation was dire. There were powerful mutants, but few could reach Alex's previous level of power, or rival Mandarin. With the 10 rings revealed, few of the X-Men present could resist. Alex frowned in annoyance, turning his head occasionally to look across, his expression grave. He hadn't expected the Mandarin to appear there. Inside the floating temple, Crystal anxiously turned to Tessa. Tessa's compatibilities weren't exceptional, so she remained in the temple to command. Crystal was merely a hired thug, not someone Alex had the authority to mobilize. Tessa glanced at Crystal, knowing what she was up to. She shook her head in relentless refusal. "No, are you just going to watch them die?" Crystal suddenly stood up, raised her hand, and a massive earthen hand reached out to grab Tessa, a grim expression on her face. Everyone in the floating temple stared in shock, wanting to step forward but unsure who to help. Subconsciously, everyone chose to help Tessa. After all, she was one of their kind. But Tessa's blunt refusal was a bit hard for everyone present to accept. They didn't want to watch Alex and Emma get into danger. Please support us. Chapter 219, More Unexpected. Tessa was incredibly clever. Seeing the hesitant steps of the floating temple, he immediately understood. With a wry smile, he quickly explained, although they're formidable, it's extremely difficult for them to kill Alex and his men. After calming everyone down, Tessa continued, and the goal is crystal clear. If we deploy our forces now, their special forces will immediately appear on the floating island. Then, Tessa didn't finish the rest of the sentence, but everyone present was no fool and naturally understood. But understanding is one thing, doing it is another. Although Tessa claimed that Alex and his men were safe, no one present, especially Crystal, believed him. Besides, it's better to be safe than sorry. If something really happened to Alex, everyone present would feel guilty for the rest of their lives. Seeing Crystal still showing no sign of letting go, Tessa said with bitterness, helpless. I can send some, but not too many. The enemy's surprise attack hadn't been exposed yet, so Tessa had to leave enough troops behind just in case. Tessa cared more about the safety of the floating island, or rather, the home of mutants, than the safety of Alex and the others. Crystal wasn't one to push back. Upon hearing Tessa's relenting offer, she quickly released her grip and unharmed, shouting impatiently, quick, get some help. We're leaving now, Tessa wanted to say, you can't go, but seeing Crystal's impatience, Tessa tactfully kept her mouth shut. With Crystal's temper, even if he spoke up, he feared she wouldn't be able to stop her and would only give him a lecture. He summoned a dozen elite X-Men and escorted them and Crystal's group off the floating island. He ignored them, completely focused on defending the island, not even paying attention to the images on the holographic console. Because of Mandarin's covert manipulation, the original one-on-one challenge was naturally untenable. Alex, Emma, and the others launched the first charge, targeting not Mandarin and the others, but those behind them. The enemy's plot was now clear, and Alex and the others' continued presence, victory or defeat, was meaningless. The most important task now was to escape and return to the floating temple. Seeing Alex and the others' movements, Strucker couldn't help but smile. Ever since their encounter with Alex, he had always been the underdog. Now that the tide had turned, he couldn't help but be pleased. With a wave of his hand, he led the others behind him in a swift pursuit of Alex. Strucker's movements were already fast, but there were others who were even faster. As Strucker took off, Mandarin and the Black Queen had already taken flight, threatening to catch up with Alex and his group. Alex's group was large, but few could fly. Alex didn't want to waste too much energy creating energy wings for them, so he just ran. Unfortunately, running can't keep up with flying, and they were about to be caught up. Seeing the Black Queen and the Mandarin closing in, Alex made a decisive move, turning and rushing towards them. Emma, take them and run. Emma paused and stopped abruptly, along with everyone else. At worst, we can fight. Before Emma could say anything, Raimi raised his cane and said angrily, running before we even start fighting is so frustrating. Raimi's words were echoed by everyone, even the weakest of the group. Not wanting to be left behind, he pulled out a pair of daggers from somewhere and wielded them in elaborate patterns, his face a look of determination. Without a word, Emma rushed towards Stryker. Seeing this, the others roared and charged back, their faces filled with excitement. The X-Men who had accompanied Emma to the duel were carefully selected. Their abilities were beyond words, and their overall strength was at the same level as Raimi's, and that was Raimi's with Alex's guidance. As for the Black Queen, needless to say, the Hellfire Club's formidable cloud couldn't rival emerging forces like the X-Men. However, the forces Strucker brought with him were somewhat inferior, but the two could still fight evenly against a group of them. The only concern was the battle between Alex, the Black Queen, and the Mandarin. These three were among the most powerful of the hosts present, making it difficult for the others to intervene. However, surprisingly, Alex displayed remarkable fortitude, appearing even more formidable than before, holding his own against the Black Queen and Mandarin. While this was certainly due to the Black Queen and Mandarin's lack of coordination, Alex's increased combat power was undeniable. Alex himself hadn't anticipated his own formidable abilities. Freed from the constraints of his physical body, his pure energy form made him impervious to any attack, whether physical or energy. As long as his consciousness registers remained intact, Alex could recover instantly. With his replication abilities deprived and only his energy control remaining, Alex became even more pure, his thoughts becoming more focused. Alex was particularly surprised to discover that as the battle continued, his mastery of energy control advanced by leaps and bounds. In just a short while, it felt more profound than even 2 days of training in the training room. Alex's progress and transformation were also noticed by the Black Queen and Mandarin. They exchanged glances, their previously indifferent demeanor becoming more serious. Seriousness is key, and this focus quickly revealed Alex's flaw. He didn't dodge or evade any attack, but was extremely wary of attacks to the head. Clearly, something was wrong. Alex didn't react at first, still immersed in the exhilaration of his enhanced energy control. It wasn't until a cutting beam from Mandarin nearly triggered his consciousness register that Alex finally regained consciousness. After a moment's reflection, he understood the situation and secretly shifted his consciousness register. Outwardly, however, Alex still feigned a preoccupation with his head. While the battle raged on Alex's side, the floating island also faced its own enemy, Strucker's surprise force. A sea of robots filled the sky, each housing a human. But that wasn't the key point. The key was that each robot bore the Hydra symbol. Hydra, how could they be here? Tessa's mind froze upon seeing these people, paused for a moment before returning to its senses. A rare expression of surprise crossed his icy face. Just as he was in shock, a red HUD suddenly stood out from the crowd. It was the Red Skull. Chapter 220 Calculation. The moment Red Skull appeared, Tessa's face paled. It wasn't because he was afraid of Red Skull's power, but rather because he was worried about Hydra behind him. After all, Hydra boasts a history as ancient as the Hellfire Club. While they lacked the powerful mutants, their combat power is no less formidable. What do we do now? Little Rollo approached Tessa, his face tense. He clenched his fists, slowly extending his bony claws. Tessa glanced at Little Rollo, then turned his gaze to Kiki, the fire dragon beside him. With a serious expression, he said, "Kiki, this battle today depends on you." The robots led by Red Skull could fly, but only a handful of mutants could. The fire dragon Kiki shook his basketball-sized head, his large eyes rolling slightly as he spoke in human language. "We can summon the Batmen. Whether they participate directly in the battle or ride on board the mutants, both are good options." Tessa was startled by this, a flicker of delight crossing his face. "How could I have forgotten about them?" Tessa paused again, slapping his forehead and shouting, "Quickly notify the Batman and the Human Beast Legion." The Human Beast Legion, a special force originally formed to deceive the descendants of Atlantis, had been largely disbanded after the war, but some remained, including a number of flying beasts and pterosaurs. Shortly after Tessa's order was issued, the Red Skull and his army of flying robots approached the floating island, and the battle was imminent. Tessa, telescope in hand, gazed upon the approaching Hydra army. A cold glint flashed in his eyes, and he suddenly shouted, "Kill!" Accompanied by this deafening cry, the previously tranquil lake beneath the floating island suddenly surged with a torrent of water. Hundreds of meters high, the waves slammed fiercely against the robots in midair. Caught off guard, countless robots plummeted like dumplings, and in an instant, the vast, overwhelming robot army was reduced by 20%. "All right," little Luo jumped up excitedly, his eyes wide and bright, almost glowing. "If you dare to trouble us, then be prepared for a never-ending attack." Tessa remained silent. The water wave attack had achieved such a significant result thanks to its surprise. A repeat attack was practically impossible. The wary Hydra army immediately gained altitude after the torrential wave, but the second wave was not nearly as effective. Seeing the waves weaken, Tessa's new order was immediately issued, giving Hydra no chance to catch its breath or recover. Fierce energy cannons flew out from all over the floating island, their force as powerful as lightning. In an instant, they appeared in the center of the robot army and exploded with a thunderous explosion. Vast swathes of robots exploded in the air like fireworks, a dazzling display. Energy cannons, powerful weapons invented by the aliens who created the Savage Land, were mostly installed in the cities of the descendants of Atlantis. Alex, excited by the prospect, ordered his men to dismantle some and place them on the floating island. Unfortunately, due to their enormous size and the difficulty of disassembly and installation, there were only fewer than 20 on the vast floating island. Furthermore, the energy cannons consumed a lot of energy and had significant side effects. They could only fire 5 rounds before they had to be shut down, otherwise there was a risk of explosion. Fortunately, after 5 consecutive rounds, Hydra's robot army was reduced by nearly 50%, achieving a significant victory. "What a shame," Tessa sighed as the energy cannons went out one by one, and new orders were issued. Already ready, Batman, carrying numerous mutants, flapped his wings and took off. Now came the real battle. Meanwhile, the battle at Alex's location encountered an unexpected crisis, but also a turning point. The throngs of people engaged in the fierce battle hadn't noticed when soldiers dressed in AIM's distinctive beekeeper uniforms gradually appeared around them, each carrying a device resembling a bazooka on their shoulders. When someone finally spotted them, everyone suddenly realized they were surrounded by these AIM soldiers. Strucker, the Black Queen's eyes narrowed, and she turned to look for Strucker, only to find that he had retreated in front of the suddenly appearing AIM soldiers. Alex's heart skipped a beat, and he panicked for no reason. Without a second thought, a massive energy shield instantly formed, protecting most of the people present, the Mutant House, the Hellfire Club, and even one or two AIM members. The instant the energy shield formed, a barrage of bullets, like miniature howitzers, erupted from the bazooka. A dense barrage of bullets instantly slammed into the shield. As if in the blink of an eye, the resilient barrier burst like a soap bubble, sending the half-missing bullets whistling towards everyone, Alex, the Black Queen, and Mandarin. Alex had greatly overestimated the power of the individual bazooka, but he hadn't expected to underestimate it after all. The moment the energy shield shattered, Alex turned to look at Mandarin, with a look of deep pleading, and shouted, "Mandolin!" The power of the bullets far exceeded Alex's imagination, leaving few alive. Mandarin, armed with the 10 rings, was fearless, but Strucker's actions infuriated him, and he immediately sought to find trouble with Strucker. However, upon hearing Alex's cry, Mandarin paused, glanced at Alex, and finally deactivated the electromagnetic interference. The moment the electromagnetic interference vanished, Alex's telekinesis raced, engulfing everyone within range and roaring as he launched a teleportation attack. The intense stinging pain made Alex feel as if his soul were being torn apart. Alex's spirit trembled violently, even his consciousness registers trembling. Finally, the stinging pain surged like a rising tide and receded as quickly as the tide. The teleportation was successful. Alex glanced around, confirming he was out of danger. He breathed a sigh of relief and sat down dejectedly, wiping the non-existent sweat from his forehead. His heart was in turmoil. The thought of the AIM soldiers' terrifying bazooka weighed heavily on Alex's heart. With Strucker's power, the savage land was destined to be a turbulent place, and the future of Mutant Home would become extremely dangerous. As his thoughts wandered, footsteps sounded. Alex turned to see the Black Queen and her followers preparing to leave. "I owe you a favor." The Black Queen noticed Alex's look and snorted coldly. Without hesitation, she quickly left with her men. The Brotherhood mutants hesitated for a moment, and most of them followed the Black Queen. Only a small number chose to stay, standing trembling beside Alex and the others. Alex smiled gently at the mutants, then glanced at them. His face darkened and he said in a cold voice, "Let's go back first." Chapter 221 Counterattack. By the time Alex led the others back to the floating temple, the battle had spread across the entire island, countless buildings crumbling and shattering under the bombardment of Hydra robots. Alex's first sight was the flying robots, the unmistakable Hydra emblem adorning their chests. Stunned, he turned to Emma in disbelief. "What's going on? Why are Hydra here?" "Never mind that for now. Get them out first." Watching the thriving floating island being ravaged by the war, Emma's heart bleeds, her face sullen, her gaze piercing the Hydra army. Alex, snapping back to his senses, leapt into the air, his flaming form expanding until he transformed into a soaring phoenix of fire. Like a tiger among a flock of sheep, he charged into the Hydra horde, his blazing flames incinerating any robots that dared approach. In the floating temple, Tessa, struggling to hold on, saw the sudden appearance of a fiery phoenix from the sky. A brilliant smile spread across his face, and he quickly broadcast the news. "Fellow warriors, Alex is back." Tessa's slightly excited voice, carried by the loudspeaker, spread rapidly across the floating island, reaching both mutants and Hydra alike. The already weakened mutants suddenly erupted in energy, launching a stunning counterattack, a testament to the power of a leader. Alex, transformed into a phoenix, was completely unaware of his potential, darting back and forth in the sky, wreaking havoc. Alex's abilities struggled against some mutants, but against the Hydra soldiers, who specialized in firearms, they were an all-powerful weapon, unstoppable. Red Skull had already noticed this and ordered everyone to descend to the ground. The robots couldn't match Alex's speed. Hiding wasn't an option, and fighting wasn't either. Red Skull had no choice but to use this method to prevent Alex from attacking without restraint. It was a bit rogue, but it was effective. Seeing the Hydra army descend to the ground, Alex had to consider the structures above ground and even worry about harming ordinary mutants. Desperate, Alex reverted to his human form and engaged in one-on-one combat. Focused on avoiding Alex, Red Skull forgot that the floating island was the mutants' main base. Faced with an invader, even the most docile would erupt, let alone the naturally unruly mutants. In an instant, the entire floating island became a vast ocean of people's war, with mutants everywhere attacking Hydra. Their bizarre abilities might not be enough to kill the Hydra, but persevering efforts wore away the stone. Thanks to the mutants' unwavering efforts, the floating island became a nightmare for all Hydras, their screams resounding across the land. The balance of war slowly tilted toward the mutants, but casualties also mounted rapidly, with countless civilian mutants tragically slain by Hydra's guns. We can't go on like this. Strucker's men will be here soon, and then, Alex, his face grim, tore a robot to shreds and telepathically contacted Emma. Emma's white dress had long since turned gray, and she looked weary, the after effects of constantly telepathically controlling the robots. With a wry smile and a shake of her head, she replied, "What can you do? Release my body and replicate Eric's abilities." Realizing the situation was dire, Alex racked his brains for a solution. After much deliberation, Alex finally came up with Eric's ability to control magnetic fields in metals. Undoubtedly, in this situation, no ability was more useful than Eric's, even against Strucker's bazooka. No, Emma shook her head without a second thought, then relaxed and suggested, "Why not just release Eric? Tell him the truth, he'll help us." Alex shook his head and explained, "Eric's mental strength isn't enough to handle so many robots. Only I can. Eric's ability to control magnetic fields and metals requires a strong psychic force, otherwise he wouldn't be able to control his abilities. In fact, most mutant abilities require a certain level of psychic power. Without psychic control, many abilities would spiral out of control." Emma was caught in a dilemma, Alex's safety on one hand, and the entire mutant community on the other. "I'm sorry, Alex," sensing Emma's pain, didn't give her a chance to speak as he sped towards Academy X, his body frozen in place. Watching Alex retreat, Emma was powerless to stop him, her rage directed only at Hydra. Emma's body, strengthened by life diamond fragments, boasts a physical fitness comparable to that of a typical mutant with physical abilities. Alex has meticulously trained her in combat, so she's naturally fierce in battle, constantly knocking robots to their knees as she maneuvers. Even a steely body would tire against robots with a physical body. But Emma never paused, seemingly tireless, her mind focused on a single thought: fight, fight, fight. Gradually, Emma's body underwent a strange transformation, her snow-white skin transformed into transparent diamond. The instant the transformation occurred, Emma realized it, and upon sensing it, she realized her body had completely transformed into diamond. After a moment's pause, Emma suddenly laughed, swiftly dashing towards the nearest robot. With a single grasp, she pierced the robot's chest, taking the Hydra soldier inside with her. "Not bad." Emma glanced up at her arm, chuckled, and fought even more fiercely. Unrelated sentence fragment: "No mistake, one song, one post, one content, one book, one forum, 1619, one book, one forum." As Emma developed new abilities, Alex freed his own body from the ice and connected it to Zora's consciousness transfer device, transferring his consciousness from the registers back to his original body. Alex had secretly brought the Zora device from the lab, intending to transfer it back later. He hadn't expected it to come in handy now. Returning to his original body, Alex didn't have time to check on his condition. He teleported to the place where Eric and the others were being held. After copying Eric and Sebastian Shaw's abilities, Alex instantly returned to the battlefield. The battlefield remained in utter chaos, filled with mutants and Hydra robots, both living and dead. A chorus of sounds intertwined into a symphony of death, echoing across the floating island. Feeling the power he had regained, Alex's lips curled up slightly, a sinister grin playing across his brows. Now, the counterattack begins. Chapter 222: The counterattack begins. Before launching his counterattack, Alex first sought out Alex. Of all the mutant's abilities, Alex favored many, but at this moment, Alex's energy blast beam was undoubtedly the most suitable. Combined with Sebastian Shaw's energy absorption and Alex's own energy control, a complete offensive and defensive strategy emerged. Energy absorption provided defense and replenishment, Alex's blast beam was the most powerful attack, and energy control provided precision guidance. After copying Alex's abilities and warning Charles and the others, Alex soared into the sky, stopping midair. Looking down at the chaotic battle below, Alex's lip curled slightly, and he said with a grim smile, "Now, Begin." With those words, Alex fully activated Eric's abilities, generating a massive electromagnetic field centered on himself. The vast electromagnetic field practically enveloped the entire floating island. The massive electromagnetic field had no effect on the mutants, but the Hydra robots were unable to escape its pull. Even though they revved their engines to resist the field's pull, they all failed, hurtling towards Alex like cannonballs. Red Skull spotted Alex immediately and, after a moment's hesitation, shouted, "Attack him! Everyone, attack him! Use artillery! Use artillery!" Many knew the secret of Alex's energy absorption ability, and Red Skull was one of them. However, in this situation, Red Skull could only resort to this method to force Alex to give up. He believed that even if Alex could absorb energy, the combined force of so many robots would undoubtedly exceed his absorption capacity. "Alex, be smart and leave now." Red Skull, not piloting his robots, gazed up at the approaching robots and Alex from the sky. A fierce look flashed across his blood-red face, and his sunken eyes shone with pride. But soon, Red Skull was stunned. Alex not only refused to leave, but defied the odds by unleashing a barrage of fire from thousands of robots. It's important to note that these robots weren't firing ordinary bullets, but rather special cannons packed with immense energy. Because they were so difficult to manufacture, each robot was equipped with only 2. The combined power of so many cannons was unimaginable, enough to destroy the entire floating island. Yet, Alex didn't explode, but instead, a look of delight crossed his face. "Shoot, shoot again," Red Skull roared, his eyes fixed on Alex. "If one wave isn't enough, I'll come back again. If I can't kill you." If Red Skull had known about Alex's battle with the Black Queen, he would never have made such a foolish decision. If the first wave hadn't killed Alex, the second wave would have been nearly impossible. However, Alex wished Red Skull knew this, as his current condition was far from good, even dangerous. Alex was able to withstand the first volley thanks to the filter he had prepared. A 3-layered sieve constructed from energy, it minimized the instantaneous energy impact. Alex's preparations proved to be extremely effective. After being filtered by the 3 layers of energy, Alex survived the initial volley of thousands of robots, avoiding the energy overload and exploding. However, the 3 layers completely collapsed after withstanding the first volley. Alex was completely defenseless against the second volley that followed. Furthermore, Alex couldn't escape. Having weathered the first volley, Alex knew the consequences of the artillery explosions. The shockwave would destroy everything on the floating island, every building, and even most of the mutants. Alex felt a flicker of regret, but he still had to do what he had to do. With a wry smile, Alex moved, aiming in a certain direction and proactively heading in. He would absorb some of the energy first, then gradually absorb the rest, thus mitigating the instantaneous energy impact of the volley. While the method was sound, it was also fraught with danger. Alex hadn't disarmed the electromagnetic field, so the artillery, like trackers, kept chasing him. Their speed grew faster as they approached, escalating the danger. And without the ability to teleport, Alex felt like he was walking on the edge of a cliff. A single misstep could lead to his demise. Seeing Alex's movements, Red Skull was stunned for a moment, then a look of ecstasy, then a sudden, nervous curse. "Don't stop. Keep firing." Although his special artillery had been expended, he still had regular weapons. While they couldn't compare to the special artillery, Red Skull didn't mind causing Alex any more trouble. As time went on, Alex's situation grew increasingly precarious. He could no longer keep up with the pursuing special artillery, yet there were still countless special artillery pieces in the sky. "We need a way to slow them down, or even better, stop them." Alex flew with all his might, glancing out of the corner of his eye at the artillery nearly touching his heels, his expression calm, neither sad nor happy. The best solution would have been to dispel the electromagnetic field immediately, but Alex refused to give up halfway and persisted. As he flew, he suddenly noticed the energy wings on his back. A smile crossed his face, then a look of frustration crossed his face. "How could I have forgotten about it?" As he spoke, Alex immediately used his energy control to create a shield, briefly blocking the approaching artillery fire before it instantly disintegrated. However, the moment the shield dissipated, a new one appeared behind him. An energy shield can't remain in place forever, otherwise, if several artillery pieces collided, they would explode, triggering a chain reaction. With time running out, Alex deployed another energy screen, a good way to slow things down. A spectacular sight unfolded in the sky. Alex flew ahead, fearlessly charging towards the small number of artillery pieces. Behind him was a long line of artillery, preceded by a shield that flickered and appeared, blocking the way whenever the line of artillery threatened to bite Alex. On the ground, as time passed, and Alex was about to escape danger, Red Skull grew increasingly anxious, wishing he could join the pursuit. Unfortunately, Red Skull had no other options, and could only secretly regret having been so stingy beforehand. If only he had given all the robots an extra special cannon, everything would have been a breeze. Unrelated sentence fragment: no mistakes, no mistakes, no content, no regrets. Chapter 223 Outbreak. Gradually, the artillery fire in the sky dwindled, and Alex's danger was finally over. Figuring the remaining artillery could no longer threaten him, Alex halted his flight and, with a sly grin, gazed at the robots following him. Once the artillery fire was dealt with, it would be their turn. As expected, Alex absorbed all the artillery fire, the sheer amount of energy making him feel as if his body was about to explode. The energy contained in the 2 waves of special artillery fire was so immense that Alex was forced to divert some of it to the fire spirits. After relieving the abnormality within him, Alex looked up at the sky full of robots and let out a sinister grin. His entire body began to flush red. A faint red glow emerged from his body, forming a massive sphere that enveloped him. On the ground, Charles and Alex exchanged a glance of surprise. Charles had previously coached Alex in developing his abilities and was well versed in Alex's energy beams, and Alex knew them even better. As soon as the red sphere appeared around Alex, the 2 men realized it was clearly Alex's shock beam. Before they could figure out why the shock beam had taken on a spherical shape, the red sphere suddenly expanded, growing larger and redder, spreading out in all directions like a shock wave. What powerful control! Charles looked at Alex with a touch of admiration and a hint of fear. Charles knew how difficult it was to control Alex's shock beam. It was unimaginable that Alex could achieve such a level of control. Alex, however, had no more thoughts than Charles's. He had only one thought: as soon as this battle was over, he would immediately find Alex and learn this method. The red energy shock wave swept in all directions, and the Hydra robots in the sky were completely unable to stop it. Wherever the red light passed, the robots exploded like fireworks, without exception. On the ground, Red Skull cursed silently and fled without a second thought. Defeat is inevitable. There's no point in staying any longer. I'll just find another opportunity to make a comeback. Just as Red Skull took a step, a sudden thought struck him. He glanced up at Alex, who was displaying his might in the sky, and a sly grin stretched across his lips. Hey, I'll give you a little trouble. As he spoke, Red Skull turned into an alley, quickly disappearing into a cluster of buildings. After destroying all of Hydra's robots in a single blow from the sky, Alex plummeted to the ground, his face pale. Unable to stand, his steps gave way and he fell to the ground, leaning against a stone pillar, gasping for air. Emma had been keeping an eye on Alex since he appeared, and seeing him fly down, she quickly ran over. Seeing Alex slump to the ground, his face pale, Emma's heart sank. She flew to Alex's side, tears streaming from her eyes. Seeing Emma transformed into a diamond for the first time, Alex wasn't surprised at all. Compared to the special effects in the movies of his past life, the real Emma was even more dazzling. Reaching out to catch Emma's falling tear diamond, Alex chuckled and said, "With this, we'll never be short of money again." Emma was startled for a moment, then came to her senses. She gently patted Alex's chest and said with disapproval, "Do you really want me to cry so badly?" As she spoke, Emma unraveled her diamond transformation and wiped the tears from her eyes, but the worry in her eyes remained undimmed. "Even if I die of poverty, I won't let you shed a single tear." Alex looked at Emma affectionately, suddenly remembering a love quote he'd stumbled across in his past life. Regardless of whether it was appropriate or not, he simply borrowed it. "If you don't want me to cry, then transfer back now." Emma sighed softly, looking up at Alex with a pleading look on her face. Alex's current physical condition meant he couldn't hold out much longer. If his current body died, even his powerful mind would be doomed. So Emma desperately wanted Alex to transfer his consciousness back to his energy body. Alex stared at Emma for a moment, then shook his head and said, "Not yet." Although the Red Skull had been repelled, they still had struck her. The bazookas his AIM soldiers were equipped with were even more dangerous than Hydra's special artillery. Knowing Alex's character, Emma hesitated for a moment before offering words of persuasion, only to find herself unable to speak. She simply looked at Alex with a sorrowful expression. "Don't worry, I'll be fine." Alex hugged Emma, whispered a soothing reassurance, and slowly stood up. Just then, Elixir Joshua trotted over. He glanced at Alex, who had reached out his hand without explanation. His face paled as he watched. He opened his mouth to speak, but heard Alex's telepathic voice. "Don't say anything." Alex's voice was hard, carrying an unyielding command. Then, a moment later, his tone softened, a hint of fatigue lingering. "Is there any way to relieve the pain first?" "Hold on for a while, then wait." Joshua hesitated for a moment, then nodded in agreement, exerting all his strength to halt the spread of the toxins in Alex's body. In reality, the toxins had already penetrated the surface of Alex's cells and penetrated deep within them, potentially killing him in an instant. "Mr. Alex, copy my ability." Joshua tried for a long time, with no effect. After a moment's pause, he suddenly said, "Double the power, that should provide some relief." Alex nodded and copied Joshua's ability for the last spot. With their combined efforts, the toxins in Alex's body were indeed forced out of his cells. Seeing this, Joshua couldn't help but smile. He wiped the sweat from his forehead, sighed, and said, "I think I'll be fine for now." Emma burst into tears of joy upon hearing the news. She hugged Alex's head and kissed him repeatedly. Alex smiled broadly in response, then released Emma after a moment. Turning to Tessa, who had arrived unnoticed, he asked, "Tessa, any news on Strucker?" Alex was deeply concerned about Strucker, and would never rest until he and his AIM soldiers were at his disposal. "He's on his way," Tessa, equally concerned about Strucker, replied. After a moment's hesitation, she added, "Crystal is taking some X-Men there, and they might run into them." Alex's expression changed drastically upon hearing this. He glared at Tessa and said, "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" As soon as he finished speaking, Alex teleported and vanished. That's all. Scorpio's going to the bathroom for a while. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 224 Contradiction. Alex teleported his way out, his face cold and filled with anxiety. Crystal's abilities were no match for Strucker's rocket launcher. If anything happened to her, Alex would be left with no explanation to the Inhumans. After all, the current Inhuman King was Crystal's brother-in-law. Alex raced along, never forgetting to explore carefully. However, to Alex's surprise, he found the site of his previous battle with Strucker and his men, but he never encountered Crystal, and there were no signs of battle along the way. What happened? Alex surveyed his surroundings, bewildered. After a long observation, Alex suddenly noticed something amiss. The signs of battle here seemed even more brutal than when he left. Most strikingly, several bodies lay on a hillock not far away. They were all AIM soldiers wearing beekeeper suits. Did Crystal defeat Strucker? Alex appeared beside the corpses of the AIM soldiers, a look of disbelief on his face. At a glance, all the AIM soldiers had holes punched through their chests. Frowning, Alex leaned in closer and exclaimed in disbelief, "Mandolin!" The holes in the AIM soldiers' bodies were clearly caused by the slicing beams. They had all been killed by the Mandarins. Thinking of this, Alex couldn't help but laugh. The Mandarins had a bad temper. Strucker had clearly intended to kill them too, but Mandarins showed no fear. After recovering, there was no way Mandarins would have let Strucker go. "I just wonder how Strucker is doing now," Alex asked, glancing around as he continued his advance towards the AIM territory. Strucker, under attack from the Mandarins, wouldn't retreat to the mutant home, so he could only run back. As for Crystal, having rushed all the way without encountering Strucker, she was no match for him, so she naturally gave chase. After figuring it out, Alex couldn't help but pick up the pace. Not far from Posidonia, Alex finally spotted Crystal and the others. Crystal and a dozen X-Men were besieging the AIM soldiers. Those AIM soldiers, who Alex feared like tigers, were like sheep facing a pride of lions, powerless to fight back. The scene was a one-sided massacre. Alex could hardly believe his eyes. As he approached, Alex realized that the AIM soldiers' bazookas had become nothing more than fire sticks, remaining silent for ages without firing a single shot. Telepathically, Alex quickly realized that these bazookas, like the special artillery fired by the Hydra robots, were restricted weapons. After 20 rounds, they ceased firing completely. The AIM soldiers had exhausted their 20-round limit while battling the Mandarins. Although they had successfully driven the Mandarins back, coincidentally, Crystal and her group had arrived, leading to the current scene. After understanding everything, Alex naturally showed no mercy, unleashing a killing spree like a tiger among sheep. The mutant home had suffered heavy losses in today's battle, with at least 80% of the floating island's buildings destroyed and casualties exceeding 10,000. Alex was filled with a simmering fury. The unmistakable source of this fury was Strucker and his AIM. Now confronted with his true enemy, Alex couldn't afford to be polite. His wrath was unleashed. Alex's sudden appearance was undoubtedly a further blow to the already struggling AIM. No, it was more like adding insult to injury. Alex, unleashing his full power, might be inferior to the Mandarin in combat. But his destructive power and lethality were undeniably unrivaled. Alex was like a battlefield reaper, savagely harvesting the lives of AIM soldiers. Countless steel balls transformed into a hail of bullets, sweeping across the sky like a brush, repeatedly slicing through the AIM camp. The AIM soldiers were like ears of wheat under a harvester, offering no resistance. The energy blast beam was a truly devastating weapon. Alex didn't need to control it. A single beam shot out, instantly reducing all AIM soldiers in its path to ash, leaving no body behind. In the center of the battlefield, watching Alex's wanton slaughter through a telescope, Strucker's face sullen, he roared, "Send men, send troops, send every last one." Strucker paused, staring at Alex through the telescope, and gritted his teeth as he ordered, "Collect all high-powered electromagnetic transmitters. We must capture him today, no matter what." Before today, Strucker hadn't known Alex's weakness, but the Mandarins had blocked Alex's teleportation. As clever as Strucker was, he'd naturally seen it. The thought of killing Alex brought a sinister grin to Strucker's face. Alex was unaware that Strucker was already preparing to deal with him. After a fierce battle, he finally reunited with Crystal and the others. When Crystal saw Alex, a bright smile spread across her dusty face. Her beautiful eyes curved involuntarily, like a crescent moon, a truly adorable sight. "Alex," Crystal rushed forward, excitedly calling out. Unfortunately, all she was greeted with was a cold face and a barrage of scolding. "Do you remember the mission I gave you? Stay on the floating island and protect its safety? Have you forgotten?" These questions were like a bucket of ice water poured over a seething Crystal, chilling her to the bone. Crystal stared at Alex, dumbfounded, and opened her mouth to say something, but nothing came out. Tears streamed down her face like a broken dam, her face instantly stained. Alex regretted the words as soon as they left his mouth, and seeing Crystal's tearful eyes, Alex's regret was even more intense. But words once spoken are like spilled water, it's hard to take them back. "Let's go back first." Alex decided to send the people back first, then slowly persuade them and apologize. After all, this was a battlefield. But what frustrated Alex was that Crystal also lost her temper and started cursing at Alex. Finally, she declared with a firm face, "I'm not going back. I'll never go back." Alex knew he was wrong. After all, Crystal had run out because she was worried about him. But she didn't expect to be met with such a roar in return. No one would be happy. "Crystal, I was wrong just now. I apologize." Alex could already sense the atmosphere around him and didn't dare to stay any longer. He reached out and grabbed Crystal's arm, humbly comforting her. "Let's talk about the rest when we get back. It's not safe here." Crystal was still angry and didn't care about what Alex said. She looked up at Alex with a stubborn face, like an angry little lion. "If you're scared, just go ahead. I don't need you to control me." Chapter 225 Danger. Alex felt a mixture of amusement and frustration at Crystal's haughty expression, yet he felt helpless. He couldn't just abandon her and leave. After a moment's hesitation, Alex glanced around, nodded, and said, "In that case, let's keep killing." That way, Alex pointed in a direction, grabbed Crystal's wrist without hesitation, and charged forward. Strucker, anxiously awaiting backup, suddenly saw Alex charging towards him. His face suddenly turned panicked, and with a cry of alarm, he quickly mobilized his men to try to stop Alex. Unfortunately, the AIM, short of ammunition, were no match for Alex. Even more would be a recipe for disaster. Crystal, constantly being held by Alex, tried to break free several times but failed. She simply allowed Alex to drag her, controlling a giant hand of earth and stone to sweep down the surrounding AIM soldiers. Behind them, the remaining dozen or so X-Men followed closely. Although Alex didn't say it explicitly, his previous words and current actions showed he was aware of the danger. They, the others, could only stay safe if they followed him, and this was precisely what Alex hadn't said. The group advanced with unstoppable force, almost reaching Strucker, when suddenly, roars erupted from outside the arena, accompanied by a violent tremor in the earth. Alex paused briefly, then released his telekinesis. Suddenly, he saw a scene straight out of Jurassic Park, a Tyrannosaurus Rex leading a horde of various dinosaurs charging towards them at full speed, crushing any AIM soldiers in their path without a moment's hesitation. Is this their dinosaur army? Crystal stepped out from behind Alex. Her cat-like face, like a harlequin, showed no fear, but rather excitement, as she watched the approaching horde. Alex turned to Crystal, then glanced at the other X-Men behind him, and pleaded again, "Crystal, there are too many dinosaurs. They might be in danger." Alex knew it would be difficult to persuade Crystal, but if he offered the safety of the other X-Men as bait, and Crystal's kindness, she would most likely accept. As Alex expected, Crystal hesitated for a moment, then glanced at the dozen or so exhausted X-Men. A flicker of guilt crossed her face, and she nodded, saying, "Okay, let's go back." Then, Crystal's face turned, and she said angrily, "But I won't forgive you." Not saying never go back was already progress, and Alex didn't force it. He said he could slowly try to appease her after they got back, and they would eventually reconcile. Thinking this, Alex immediately activated teleportation, but to Alex's horror, it failed again. Noticing Alex's expression drop, Crystal couldn't help but grow worried. What's wrong, Alex? Even furious, she still cared deeply for him. Electromagnetic interference? Teleportation's failing. Alex hadn't expected Strucker to be so clever, let alone so quick. Crystal panicked, tears streaming down her face. She looked at Alex with a sorrowful expression. "It's all my fault. How could I blame you?" Alex reached out and gently wiped Crystal's tears away, whispering a soothing reassurance. Turning to Strucker, she said coldly, "Don't worry, even if we can't leave, we'll be fine." As she spoke, Alex equipped the remaining 17 X-Men with energy wings and told them to leave immediately. The X-Men, of course, refused to agree and insisted on staying. "Okay, those with ranged attack capabilities stay, and those without can go back." Alex glanced at the 17 men, his face stern, and he spoke sternly, "Otherwise, staying here will only be a burden." The 17 X-Men exchanged glances, and finally, 11 of them turned and flew away, faces filled with resignation. Their energy wings couldn't support them back to the floating island, but as long as they left this battlefield, they had plenty of ways to escape. The remaining 6 gathered around Alex with excitement. Fighting alongside Alex was the dream of many X-Men. Alex looked at the charging dinosaur army, then at the endless stream of AIM soldiers behind them, their bazookas wielding them. His expression was grim. Crystal and the remaining 6 X-Men also noticed the AIM soldiers behind them, their faces changing dramatically. Although they had never personally experienced the power of bazookas, they had experienced it through holographic images. "What do we do now?" Crystal, now overcome with guilt, grabbed Alex's shoulders and spoke up. "How about we run back, out of the range of the electromagnetic interference?" Alex smiled wryly and shook his head. With Strucker's intelligence, there was no way he wouldn't be prepared for this. He was afraid the electromagnetic interference would expand before he could escape. Of course, Alex wouldn't say this out loud, lest it make Crystal feel even more guilty. With a faint smile, Alex pointed in Strucker's direction and said confidently, "Capture the leader first. As long as we capture Strucker, they won't dare touch us. Get to the sky, spread out as much as possible, and take cover." Alex's smile faded. He looked sternly at Crystal and the 6 X-Men, warning with a sharp gaze, "Don't be greedy. Saving your life is the most important thing." With those words, Alex shot out like an arrow, charging towards Strucker and the AIM army, facing the dinosaur army. Seeing Alex's movements, Crystal couldn't help but scream in surprise. Without thinking, she was about to rush over to help. Just as she moved, Alex turned, looked over, and said with a smile, "Don't worry about me." With Alex's voice, a series of narrow, Silver blades formed a wall of blades that blocked Alex's way. The dinosaurs that charged were instantly dismembered by the sharp blades, and the dripping blood instantly dyed Alex red. Ah! Crystal screamed in shock, then froze, tears welling up in her eyes again. Someone nearby, noticing Crystal's sudden freeze, quickly tugged at her clothes and shouted, "What's wrong, Crystal? Distraction on the battlefield is no joke, it's easy to get killed." Alex, his body's back. Crystal had been so angry that she hadn't noticed Alex's abnormality until just now, when she suddenly realized it. Thinking of the toxins in Alex's system, Crystal was on the verge of collapse. She was nearly driven mad by self-blame and guilt. The 6 X-Men were stunned by this answer. It seemed this person hadn't noticed it all along. They secretly complained, but they kept trying to persuade him, "Crystal, now is not the time to be dazed. Saving your life is the greatest help to Alex." Crystal paused, raised her hand to wipe away her tears, and looked at Alex's back with a determined look, her aura surging. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone, see you in the next video.